This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Let's get it cracking here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Great to have you with us, Andrew Paterson, along with Michael Remis. And very busy show coming up today. A lot of hockey talk and a lot of other things. Some rule changes in the National Football League. Busy day here in Winnipeg on home ice, not for the Jets, but for the Manitoba Moose and the Ice MJHL playoffs continuing. And of course, baseball season just around the corner. We will have a extended Jets segment with Jeff Hamilton coming up a little bit later on in the program. I will also take a trip around the National Hockey League and discuss some of the things that are being talked about by the NHL GMs right now down in Florida with our good friend Stephen Whyno of the AP. And a little later on this afternoon, in the second hour of the program, we'll also bring on the voice of the Manitoba Moose, the Fink himself, Daniel Fink, to set up tonight's big game against Laval for the Manitoba Moose and promote the spring break staycation game, where I believe they're giving out bucket hats to fans that are arriving at the game. So, we're going to be all over the map, tons to get to today, and it's great to have you all with us. First things first, a big shout out to our friends over at our sponsors that make it happen each and every day, including F Apparel, Vita Health Fresh Market, Culligan Water, Manitoba Battery, Royal Sports, Not Auto Corp, Little Brown Jug, Princess Auto, Boston Pizza, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Canadian Club Whiskey, and Coolbet Canada. And very much looking forward to Friday. Couple of, one returning sponsor back for the summer and a brand new one involved with the Winnipeg Sports Talk family. We'll tell you about that a little later on this week. Hey, before I bring in Michael Remis, a quick note, folks, and especially for you podcast listeners. Again, if you ever have the opportunity, give us a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or Spotify. Always helps us out. And if you are around your computer at some point, throw your boys a vote in the Winnipeg Nightlife Awards, WNLA.ca. You can get on there, vote for us as the top radio station /podcast. Just love the fact that we're a finalist in that category. And of course, our friends at Little Brown Jug, Nicolinos, and more with all the great categories out there. So yeah, WNLA.ca. Toss a vote your way for your friends over at Winnipeg Sports Talk. Let's get Michael Remis in here. Stephen Whyno coming up in about 20 minutes or so. Remo, what's going on? How are you hanging in there? You sort of dealing with what I had last week, which isn't a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm making my way through the show here. So I'm doing okay. Coffee is really helping me right now. Big coffee guy. It's kind of like, I don't know, gives you a little boost. So doing good. Looking forward to today's show. Some great guests with Whyno. I know a lot to get to at the NHL meetings in Florida. Hamilton on the Jets, and of course Fink on the Moose. But what's up, everyone in chat? And hey, Hustler.
You know what? We should get to this right off the bat, and it's not a Jets or a Winnipeg topic as much, but it is a hockey topic, and that was the passing of Eugene Melnyk last night. Kind of came across the wire. Social media kind of mid to late evening last night. 62 years old, the owner of the Ottawa Senators passes away. And listen, he was a very polarizing figure, shall we say. I mean, there's a lot of things that he did that rubbed fans of the Ottawa Senators the wrong way, and certainly ran his business in a particular way. But, as often happens, people kind of run to one narrative while someone is alive. I think we did know that, he was dealing with some pretty serious health issues. And you pointed this out to me last year. At some point, didn't they put out a call for some sort of a transplant with fans? And at that point, you realize, holy smokes, this is serious. That being said, there wasn't really a lot of news about this as we got into the hockey season. And for a lot of people, when that news was sort of well in the rearview mirror, it did somewhat catch everyone by surprise. And there's a lot of people that speak very highly of Eugene Melnyk and said that he did a lot for them. Of course, he rescued the Senators out of bankruptcy in 2003, and they did have quite a bit of success under his watch. Falling short of winning the ultimate goal. But obviously a sad day for the National Hockey League and the Ottawa Senators. And, what will be interesting to see going forward, is what this does to the organization. Who runs the club, who owns the club, whether it stays within the family, is it sold? And of course, the Ottawa Senators, for their part, looking to, get out of that, red herring of arena way the heck out of town in Canada, Ontario, and hopefully have something back into Ottawa. But certainly, first things first, condolences to the family. Still have two relatively young daughters. I believe I heard today they're 19 and 21 years old. So, a sad day for Ottawa sports and the National Hockey League. And, while again, people will speak about the way that he ran the team, certainly was someone that did a lot for hockey there, despite rubbing some people the wrong way. And you hope that, obviously the family gets past this, and you do wonder what the future of the Ottawa Senators is right now. A nice tweet from Brady Tkachuk, Pierre Dorion, a number of individuals spoke very highly from Eugene Melnyk. And that was not something we really heard very often publicly. But as often happens, people really do focus on the positive when someone meets their untimely passing.
Yeah, 62 years old. Way too young. And yes, in 2015, he had a liver transplant. And I was reminded that he put out the call because he was a couple days away from passing if he didn't get this transplant, and they were able to find a donor because they went public and extended his life a number of years. As you said, done so much for hockey in Ottawa, even if there are, you do see some hashtags out there on Twitter, but there's no doubt that he, rescued the team and done a lot for hockey. They're also heavily involved in horse racing, Hustler. So he was in the, I think, Breeders' Hall of Fame as well. So, incredible life, Eugene Melnyk, way too young, 62. I was saddened to see that last night.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we thought we'd, just mention that right off the top. Again, we'll talk about, a number of the bigger hockey stories coming up with Stephen Whyno. Hey, give a shout out to our guy, Mal Paris. He's been, he's on the list, as they say. Many of us have been on the list as of late. It seems to be going around. Hopefully, like most people, you'll kind of get through a couple really miserable days and start feeling better. But man, it is everywhere. Be careful right now, folks, especially if you haven't had it already. It seems like even the people that thought they'd gone through 2 years, myself included, avoiding it, it got me recently. And obviously, it's getting a lot of people right now. So be careful, govern yourselves accordingly. And hopefully, Maul and the rest of people that have been hit with it right now will be feeling better real soon. Jets practice today, Reem, and I didn't expect a lot to come out of this practice today, but it was interesting, courtesy of our buddy Kenny Weeb, who's going to join us on Friday, that it does look like pretty much business as usual, and lineup as we saw on Sunday night in the win over the Arizona Coyotes, which means that Ville Heinola is going to stay in the lineup. We talked about it with Mike yesterday. I don't think there was anything that he did that would, prevent him from being back in the lineup against the Buffalo Sabres on Wednesday night. And I know Dave Lowry had said that when they were putting Ville in, that, Logan Stanley was a little bit banged up. I think that was just protecting the player. I think it was time for Ville to get in. I think Logan had struggled, over the course of the past few games. And, we talked before about having a legitimate competition from some of these players in the bottom of the lineup. You don't really have that with the forward group right now at all. It's basically who's ever there is playing outside of Adam Brooks, who's the extra. But when it comes to the blue line, you got the five guys that seemingly the veterans on the extended contracts are mainstays. But I think for a long time, many of us have been, hoping that maybe there'd be a little bit more legitimate competition for at least that sixth spot right now while the other guys are healthy. And, I know Dave Lowry kind of alluded to somewhat of an injury. I think it was based on performance. And I think Ville Heinola's performance certainly warranted him staying in the lineup tonight or for Wednesday. And certainly from practice today, as he was practicing again with Nate Schmidt, it certainly looked like that is what's going to be the case for this quick back-to-back heading out east.
Yeah, it was kind of puzzling how he was just sitting there as a healthy scratch. This is a former first-round pick and he just wasn't playing. And I think Logan Stanley kind of opened the door give them a reason to give Billy a shot. I mean, a couple giveaways leading to goals wasn't a good look, and I think Billy's got to play, whether it's at the Moose or with the Jets. And having him as a healthy scratch, I don't think was beneficial. So I was happy to see him get into the lineup on Sunday. Got an assist, got the fighter helmet from the team after, so it shows you what they think of him. And nice to see him back there with Nate Schmidt, kind of solidified the pair a little last game, and I was against Arizona. I mean, you're playing against Buffalo, although Buffalo had a big win last night against Chicago, big comeback win. So I am looking forward to seeing Heinola get another shot, and I think that's nice to see because last year he was a healthy scratch for a lot of the year, and he posted the the picture of him photoshopped on Bernie Sanders in the chair with the gloves. Remember
is that the best Jet player Instagram post in team history?
Like behind the money phone, or?
Well, I mean, listen, the money phone's one of the most notorious.
Yeah, that's
I don't necessarily think it's the best. I mean, I don't think it did him a lot of favors. I mean, it was incredibly tone deaf at the time that it was put out. I mean, listen, if that's the off season when he's just having fun with his buddies, it's very different than when a bunch of people are in the middle of a lockout and not working and not being able to go through.
How much discussion are we still getting from the money phone? So I agree with you. It's definitely the most notorious, but I guess it depends on your definition of the best. I mean, got a lot of engagement, but yeah,
it did. A lot of eyes on it.
But the Heinola, his face photoshopped on the Bernie Sanders picture after the last season. I mean, we're still talking about it. So yeah, maybe, I mean, in terms of quality content, yeah, maybe it is up there.
Well, it is.
I don't know what the contender would be. Like Andrew Ladd posting a picture of him catching a giant sturgeon in the summer, or Buffalo. Is there some picture of Bufflin doing something? But if someone else has one, I mean, I don't know.
I you know what? I still laugh about the Philly that post last year. And I mean, listen, I think he was doing it somewhat tongue in cheek that he'd like to be playing, but it was just so well done. And tell you what, for a young guy to have that sort of confidence to put it out, I think it gives me a lot of hope that when he does actually, earn a permanent job in the league, he'll have the headspace to handle the ups and downs of the National Hockey League with the Plums so far. All that being said, I am looking forward to seeing him in the lineup, and I think you just hope that he plays at a level that doesn't give the coach an opportunity to take him out. Listen, I mean, I love Billy, and I think he's got a real bright future going forward. There is, and I'm not sure why this is. I think it's maybe just where we are today in the world, where especially if you're dealing with social media, by supporting or being behind one guy, it means you have to be totally against the other guy. Like some of the biggest fans of Ville Heinola, spend most of their time, shit talking Logan Stanley. And, I think both of them bring, certain things to the team. Now, who has a higher upside long term in the National Hockey League? Probably Ville Heinola, I think, with what we've seen so far. But again, I think the plan always was that Logan Stanley maybe would be a little bit of a later developer. The bottom line is Logan Stanley's had some real ups and downs, but for the same token, I mean, I saw some things yesterday talking about how Ville was so great in those final games before he came out. I'll be honest. I mean, the game, and I said this on the show on the 15th of February, after being at the game on Valentine's Day against the Chicago Blackhawks, I thought Ville really struggled in that game. I thought he struggled in his own end, and I thought he struggled doing the things that he brings to the table that are his best attributes, and that's his ability to move the puck out of the zone, make a good first pass, clear it out. Now, listen, the entire team looked ugly in that game, and I don't think the players were always in the right spot. But, I mean, I said after that show that I wouldn't at all be surprised if Logan Stanley went back in afterwards, and that's exactly what happened. Now, I certainly didn't think it would take a month for Heinola to get back in the lineup. Played a little bit in the Moose. He's been in the press box for a little bit. But listen, he played well on Sunday night. He's earned this opportunity to go forward. And, I certainly hope Dave Lowry kind of goes, well, what have we been wanting under this new regime and the interim coach? A little bit more accountability. And it's very easy for the coach to kind of show you're being accountable, if you will, for young players and rookies. So, you know what? If he plays well like he did beforehand and pulls his end of the bargain. Let's leave the kid in the lineup right now. And, at some point, I imagine through injury or depending on where this hockey team is when it comes to faint playoff hopes, we might see both of those players, maybe even more of the youngsters get in. But right now, as long as the rest of the veterans are healthy, those 5 guys are going to be in. And to me, it's going to be a battle between the 2 other defensemen on the lineup, in the lineup to get into play. And right now, Ville Heinola has certainly acquitted himself well, and he will be the guy, it seems, on Wednesday against the Sabres.
Yeah, and all the other lines, basically as you showed them earlier, the same as before. Stasny, Shafley, Ehlers, Connor, Dubois, Wheeler, Sanford, Lowry, Appleton, Harkins, Tony Nato, Svechnikov, Brooks as the extra guy, Morrissey, DeMello, Dylan Pionk, and Heinola Schmidt. I think the defense is going to be something we're talking about all offseason. It's funny how it dominated last season. We thought that it was fixed, but now you have the problem where you have too many of these young guys who came in and played well. They're all blocked because you have Morrissey, DeMello, Dylan, Pionk, and Schmidt signed to these contracts going out, but all of them at least 3 more years. And then you have Stanley, Heinola, who Chisholm came in and played well, but also Samberg and Kovacevic. You have all these guys. Like, what do you do with so many guys? And who are you gonna?
Well, let me put this question to you. Let me put this question to you because I talked about it with Mike yesterday.
Yeah.
And he said, if we're going to, let's set the over-under on number of, and I'm just using those 5 defensemen. The over-under on 1.5 defensemen moved in the offseason. Is it over or under? I mean, I think one of them, you have to open at least another spot. But, do you think they're at the point where they might potentially move 2 of them? And have, an opening for essentially, you're looking at a defense with 3 of the veterans from this season, Logan Stanley, Ville Heinola, and potentially Dylan Samberg, Johnny Kovacevic, Declan Chisholm in that mix. I think you can make an argument that that's the right thing to do for the club. Although I will say easier said than done when it comes to trading those players, especially a guy like Nate Schmidt. I think Nate Schmidt would be a guy that despite what he brings to the room, what he brings on the ice compared to what you're paying him probably would make him the guy that you might want to trade first out of those 5 defensemen. That being said, I'm not too sure how movable that contract is, although he's been moved the last 2 summers for draft picks and, moved to other teams. So, I guess nothing's impossible at that time. But where do you come out on that, Remis? Do you think it'll just be one move or will it be a more significant change to the blue line? And hit us up in chat with your thoughts.
I think ideally when you're constructing a roster, you want to have your bottom, 2 of your defensemen, 2 of the 6, be guys on low salary contracts so you can, be within the salary caps. If you have them on, Heinola and someone else on an entry-level deal together, then you can use some of that money on the forwards. The problem is who do you trade? I think the guys who are the most wanted by their teams would be Brendan Dillon, and Dylan DeMello. But those are the guys who the Jets probably don't want to trade. So I think Brendan Dillon brings an element of toughness that none of them have. So Morrissey, I think he's got a long, expensive contract, and he's your number 1 guy. I don't think he's going anywhere. Pionk, he's having a down year, maybe because he's a bit banged up. They're kind of hearing a little bit about that. We're not sure. So, as much as Dylan DeMello, the metrics will say he's the best defender on the team, might be the most attractive and easiest one to trade, and you can bring someone in as much as you don't want to, but you have to free up money so you can get some depth forwards and make room for the for the defensemen that are coming in. You got to get these guys.
And here's the thing. Let's just talk about a guy like Schmidt, because as I mentioned, at nearly $6 million, that's not an easy contract to trade.
Oh,
I do think there'll be an opportunity elsewhere in the league for potentially a guy that is in maybe a similar situation than Nate Schmidt is, slightly overpaid with a year or 2 left on their contract, that might be available from another team in some sort of a swap. Because, in the situation the Jets are in right now, they certainly do need some more help up front. And while you're maybe not going and signing a guy to a deal at $5 or $6 million, I think within the way the team's cap framework works right now, you can probably handle that on the club, and the ability to shift that cap dispensation from the blue line to the forward group, get a little bit deeper in the bottom six, even as potentially an overpay on that particular contract, and at the same time move a Kovacevic, a Sandberg, a Heinola into the top six of your blue line at a much, much lower cap hit. I mean, looking at this team this year, I think that there's a lot of reason to think that would be a move that would benefit the Jets, and I think Kevin Cheveldayoff would be interested in making.
Yeah, I think I would maybe lean under. I think you can play. You have the one spot open, right? So, I mean, the first option would be to try to move Nate Schmidt if you have to eat some salary or include a pick. But the Jets gave up what, a second round pick for him?
A third round pick. Two second rounders for Dylan, a third rounder for Schmidt. And to be honest, I mean, looking at that, I mean, you could say somewhat it's part of what they bring, on the ice. But the other part of it was simply the contract. And, if Nate Schmidt is, $2 million a year instead of $6 million a year, you're paying a lot more to get it. So, I mean, listen, you're giving the third round pick, but you're also assuming that contract. Vancouver didn't retain any of that salary. So it does make it probably the most challenging of the 5 contracts to move if you decided to do it.
Yeah, maybe there's more room. I mean, there's more room, teams have in the offseason. They need a puck-moving defenseman, and I agree with the Barflies in chat. Schmidt contract is too expensive for a third-pairing team. I know he's he's actually been pretty good for point production, but if you're going to play him on the third pair, I mean, $6 million, too much. So I think you look at moving him first, and maybe you can find a taker. I would say that would be your first option. But if you have to do something else, maybe, I wouldn't want to move Brendan Dillon or Dylan DeMello, but I mean, if you have to move salary and nobody wants to take on a certain player's contract, then you have to look at alternatives. So I would say, I'm going to say under 1.5. I don't think 2. Unless, can you count a young player? Like, do they think they trade one of their young defensemen for a younger, a similar forward? I don't know.
Well, I mean, we'll see. Spungen C says, keep them all, quit playing Monopoly. And Mark Sports Video says, new coaches with new defensive system before releasing anyone. Well, guys, I mean, that's all fine and dandy to say, but that just means, I mean, are you fine with having as much money as the Jets have distributed to the blue line right now, being the case going into next season? And are you fine with potentially losing or have to trade some of the prospects once they become, like, I don't have in front of me who's no longer waivers exempt next year. But, you're starting to get into that point with some of those players. And then the other thing is, I mean, do you want Ville Heinola to potentially be playing in the minors or in the press box again next year? And I think, I would say the majority of people that watch this team realize that they are ready for somewhat of a change on the blue line. So to me, that's a much bigger picture question that we'll probably be asking as soon as the Jets season is finished and we get into the offseason. Will be a very interesting draft week now that, a few more picks have been acquired by the Winnipeg Jets that maybe weren't there before the trade deadline. And of course, we've also got to see what happens with the New York Rangers in the playoffs, because if the Rangers can somehow pull off a couple series wins, that second rounder or one of the 2 second rounders for Andrew Kopp becomes a first rounder in the upcoming draft in Montreal. All right, we'll get Remis back in here in a bit. Jeff Hamilton coming up, and we will tee up the Moose game tonight. Team back at home after that long homestand, but Stephen Whyno coming up in just a second. Do you want to thank the sponsors that make this show happen, including our friends over at F Apparel, Winnipeg-owned business down at 190 Smith Street with Winnipeg's best and most affordable custom suits for men. And not just suits, dress shirts, chinos, golf pants, untucked dress shirts, shoes, ties, accessories, and more. Every guy needs at least one suit that fits and looks great. And with weddings happening again, grads and whatnot, F Apparel is the place to be. They're the top choice in Winnipeg for wedding and grad suits. Great deals for your entire wedding party. If you get your suits from F, talk to them about that. And if you do have a high school graduate, bring down, show them your valid high school ID before their big day in June, and they'll get a free shirt and tie along with their suit, so you can get fully decked out starting at just $400. F Apparel, EPHapparel.com online, and 190 Smith Street downtown. Our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market continue being the go-to place in Winnipeg for the best selection of natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries. and not just groceries, some amazingly delicious and healthy lunch options like Vita Market salads, soups, and sandwiches at their grab-and-go deli. And if you can't make it into the store, visit their brand new, fully shoppable website to buy online or schedule a delivery with Instacart. Vita Health Fresh Market, now with 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and they're online at myvita.ca. And while we're living healthy with plenty of trips over to Vita Health Fresh Market, it always starts with hydration and a great water source. And when you think water in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba, there's only one place to go, and that is the experts at Culligan, who have been doing it for over 65 years as the go-to people for water and water services in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba. You can pop by and see them at 1200 Sargent Avenue or give them a call at 694-5180. They've got it all: water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, not to mention citywide delivery services. And if you've got water needs for your business, talk to them about commercial and industrial water products and solutions available at Culligan Water. You can also check them out online at drinkculligan.com. All right, let's talk some puck and welcome in our good friend Stephen Whyno from the AP. Whyno was covering the Capitals game last night, and let's just say it was not a very banner evening for the Caps, who got thumped by the Carolina Hurricanes. Stephen, what's going on? It's great to have you back on the show in the Peg. How are you?
Good to see you, Hustler. I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. A little under the weather last week, but we got through it. Trade deadline was quite interesting, and now we're sort of post-deadline making it. Let's just go back to last week, though. I mean, what did you make of the entire, time leading up to the trade deadline? And were you surprised at how aggressive some of the contenders were and the amount of first-round picks that were doled out by teams that seemingly have a very good chance of deep playoff runs this spring?
Sure. And you know what doesn't win the Stanley Cup? Draft picks. And if you're Julian Breezeball, you trade your first-round pick for Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman, and it works out. And you traded more now for Brandon Hagel. You see the almost the arms race, specifically in the Eastern Conference, but Calgary and Colorado as well. Just it almost felt like teams needed to make moves to match other teams' moves. And Ron Hextall even said, I didn't feel like I had to make a move, and then they end up with Rickard Rakell. And Brian McClellan goes and gets Marcus Johansson and Johan Larsson, and that's a minor move compared to Max Domi to Carolina. Everything the Rangers did, obviously, with Andrew Kopp, Tyler Mott, and Justin Braun. The Bruins get Lindholm. It's almost like everyone was one-upping each other, specifically in the Eastern Conference, because it's going to be a dogfight in the playoffs. And what it did to me...
Ooh. A little bit of a loss there with Whyno. We'll hopefully get a reconnection right away. We just lost him. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. Stephen, can you hear us okay? You know what? I think we're going to need to reconnect. But, he does make a great point. I mean, it really did turn out to be somewhat of an arms race. I mean, when Tampa dropped it and went for Brandon Hagel with the 2 first-round picks as well as 2 prospects, I think you realize that they were all business and looking to do something that, no one had done since the 80s with a three-peat. Something that the Bombers are going to be trying to do for the first time since the 80s coming up this year in the Canadian Football League. So it certainly did end up being somewhat of an arms race. Stephen, sorry, we lost you there just when you were comparing some of the, the incredibly aggressive moves, particularly from the Florida teams with the first-round picks that went out the door.
Yeah, and look, one team's going to win the Stanley Cup. Don Waddell said that. But it's going to be a dogfight in the East and the West to get out of there, right? I mean, you could pick any of 13, maybe 14 teams that are going to get in the playoffs and say that team could be hoisted in the end of June. It wouldn't be surprising. It just feels like the playoffs they're always a grind, but it feels it's going to be particularly a grind after the moves the contenders made at the deadline.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Now, as far as the West goes, Calgary, sort of got out early. And, they got Tyler Toffoli. They added, it looks like we've lost Whyno again. Remo, you want to just give him a phone call?
Yeah, sure. Steven, I can phone you if you want.
Yeah, let's do it on the horn to just to make sure we don't lose our friend. Do you have his number?
I might actually.
I'm going to share the contact with you.
I can just phone him. Oh, I got it.
There you go. There you go.
I'll phone him right now. 1 sec.
Yeah, give Whyno a quick call. We'll just do it on the phone so we appreciate him. I know he was at practice running around. He's got another interview this afternoon, so making it all happen. But to me, the battle, and we're going to see these two teams playing tonight. And I'm going to get into this a little bit later on. We break down the Coolbet lines, but there's 10 40-win teams in the National Hockey League. And 4 games tonight feature head-to-head matchups between 40-win teams. And one of those games is Calgary and Colorado. Unfortunately, no Nate McKinnon for Colorado. And I say that unfortunately because we did the lock shop earlier, and I thought, geez, plus 103 on the Avalanche, right on. Well, now it's about plus 119, so we'll get to that later on. But there really is, in a lot of ways, there has been an arms race, but in the West, it sort of seems like there's 2 teams. But I'm interested to get Stephen's thoughts on the Minnesota Wild too. I mean, they were able to beat the Avs on Sunday night in overtime, and after that real tough start to the the post All-Star break period of the schedule, the Wild have totally straightened the ship right now. And, you add Marc-Andre Fleury and, who knows, maybe there should be no. Hey, Stephen, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Yeah, we're all good. So, let's just get back to what you're talking about. Calgary and Colorado have sort of been the teams, at least over the past month and a half, it sort of seemed to be on a collision course. But I was pretty interested in what the Minnesota Wild did as well. And we saw the way they handled the Avalanche on Sunday night with that overtime win. That there are some other teams that certainly plan to upset that planned conference final between the Flames and Avalanche.
Yeah, and we could be on a crash course, honestly, Hustler, for a battle of Alberta in one division, and something like Colorado, Minnesota, or Colorado, St. Louis in the Central. And these are going to be heavyweight series. And that's the one thing that, like, you don't want to start crowning Colorado or Calgary for that very reason, because even if they get past a first-round matchup, it's not going to be easy. Colorado facing a St. Louis, Colorado facing a Nashville, a Minnesota there, because the Wild, the questions with them was Cam Talbot and goaltending. And now, since they got Marc-Andre Fleury, Cam Talbot's been the best goalie in the NHL. So go figure on that one. And Dean Evison has his team playing hard, always has his team playing hard. Kirill Kaprizov adds some that kind of talent that's hard to find around hockey. And the Wild are going to be a tough out. You're going to make me put a money line bet on anybody to come out of the West. It's going to be Calgary or Colorado, but it's going to be hard. And the Wild, if you get the kind of goaltending out of either Talbot or Fleury or both during a playoff series, the only Achilles heel I think Colorado has might be Darcy Kemper in goal, and maybe kind of outscoring their problems a little bit defensively and in goal. And at that point, it becomes hard to win playoff series like that, as we've seen the Capitals over the years and the Maple Leafs in recent years learn that lesson the hard way.
Stephen Whyno with the AP is with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. You can follow him on Twitter at @SWhyno. Stephen, let's talk about some of the topics that are being kicked around at the GM meetings right now. We knew that a lot of GMs were rubbed the wrong way by Nikita Kucherov missing the season, coming back and the team playing way over the cap and winning the cup. I mean, similar to a few years ago with Patrick Kane, there's the potential, I guess, that the Vegas Golden Knights actually make the playoffs. They could be in a similar situation. What are you hearing about discussions between the league and the PA as to that issue? And, is there any possibility that will be agreed to anytime soon, or is this something that really needs to, be talked about the next time they sit down for collective bargaining?
I think we need to forget about it entirely. Why would the players honestly accept something like that and change the system? There's nothing in it for players unless you get some sort of playoff bonus system beyond kind of winner share sort of thing out of kind of agreement like this. And to me, this is something that I think we're overstressing about. Every GM in the league, if they had an opportunity to use the kind of LTIR loophole, would do it. And to have a salary cap in the regular season is one thing. Players don't get paid in the playoffs. You want to see the best hockey and the best teams in the playoffs, and putting a hard cap on the playoffs, even if it's just whatever, the 20 guys who are in uniform that night, it does nothing but make the product worse, really. And there were a few complaints. Obviously, Dougie Hamilton made his comment about playing a team that was $18 million over the cap, and people might do the same thing with Florida or Vegas this year. But this is not a big problem to me. And I think ultimately at the end of this week, the GMs are going to say, we're going to keep the system as is. If it happens far more often, figure out another solution other than this.
The only thing that I'll say when you ask about what's in it for the players is, I mean, this has specifically helped a very small group of players on a few teams. And like Dougie Hamilton, I mean, I would imagine that the rank and file of the National Hockey League that's not in this situation is going, well, wait a second. Why are we at such a big disadvantage going in to the playoffs playing against a team that's so much over the cap when we're essentially, like most other teams, working on an entirely different rule? Like, I would be fascinated to know if you actually polled NHL players how they feel about it, because it's certainly not going to harm them financially if they stick to the cap. I mean, as we mentioned, everyone's getting paid the same, from the regular season, and then the playoffs are, set out as an entirely different system.
Yeah, but I think what you would say to players, if I were a Lightning player talking to somebody on another team, I'd say that could be you next time. You could be on that team where you just happen to get hurt right before the deadline. Your team goes and loads up, and you win a championship. It's not like winning the lottery, because you don't want to see anybody get hurt. But it would be interesting to see kind of the 700 plus players in the league, where they stand on this, because I don't think there's a whole lot of strong opinions about it. And that's why, even from a GM standpoint, I'm not sure there's enough juice to actually make a change here.
Stephen Whyno is with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Couple of the other things that have been, I know they're going to have a further talk about this topic next meeting at July. Obviously, it won't have anything happening. Listen, you've covered this league for a long time. Have you ever seen anything as bizarre as the Evgeny Dadonov trade saga coming out of the deadline? And just your thoughts on what that does, speaking of teams that are over the cap, to the Vegas Golden Knights, and what changes might we see coming out of what was certainly an embarrassing situation for Vegas, to be honest, and the National Hockey League as a whole.
Yeah, it was embarrassing, and it's certainly, I think we will see a change in the as soon as physically possible in that NHL Central Registry, which handles all the trades and signings and such. Will have somewhere locked away a list of every player's no trade protection somewhere. They really do want to keep the circle small and not have a whole lot of that out, because if it's Anaheim, or if it's Winnipeg, if it's Buffalo, if it's Washington, wherever, you don't want teams kind of offended by players not wanting to go there. You don't want these lists necessarily to be public, but someone's got to have this. It's almost like, how did this happen? A situation like that, and there were some nefarious things that happened in the situation, and I've seen reports about blaming the Senators. It's not the Senators' fault, but the NHL has singled out kind of where the blame lies on this, even if they're not saying it publicly. They know who was in the wrong in the situation, and now the Vegas Golden Knights they're in a tough spot. This is. I don't know what kind of poker analogy to pull here, but they're in trouble in salary cap, to the point where they're not going to be able to activate Mark Stone and Alex Martinez from LTIR before the end of the regular season. And you're looking at they're technically in a playoff spot right now. Dallas Stars have a bunch of games in hand on them. The Jets are chasing them. I know it might be a tough kind of math problem for the Jets and the Canucks to make up space there, but the Stars have 4 games in hand on Vegas. And without kind of activating these guys before the end of the regular season, including getting maybe Robin Leonard back at some point, I don't know how the Golden Knights kind of keep pace in the Western Conference. And it's going to be fascinating to see the chaos that unfolds in Vegas with Bill Foley, Kelly McCrimmon, Pete DeBoer, and all of that. If this team that would be, I guess, in theory, $10 million over the salary cap somehow misses the playoffs, it would be wild, because the Vegas Golden Knights have quickly gone from kind of the lovable expansion team to the biggest villains in hockey, without a doubt.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it was kind of funny to see the reaction from around the league, and with everything that happened with the Dadonov trade. And I don't think you would have had that with many other teams other than Vegas. And hey, you know what? There are some people that have been jealous of their success. It's been an incredible story, but they have certainly done things their own way. And you mentioned Bill Foley. I mean, I have the exact same questions. If this does not end up in their favor and they miss the playoffs, this is a guy that fired Gerard Gallant way earlier than anyone could have possibly imagined. I mean, their pressure to win is different, I think, in Vegas because of the successes that they've had so far. And if they miss the playoffs and do it under the black cloud of one of the most embarrassing non-trades in recent league history, you do wonder if there will be individuals that have to pay the price with their jobs in Sin City.
Yeah, and you mentioned what the reaction would be if another team did this. There's no other team that would do this. That's the problem here, and I think that's the reputation now that the hockey operations department in Vegas has. But you're right. Bill Foley has shown a lack of patience, to put it kindly, about kind of whether it's personnel moves or roster moves or kind of wanting the next big guy, Jack Eichel, Alex Pietrangelo, Mark Stone, and firing Gallant and kind of moving George McPhee upstairs to keep Kelly McCrimmon. And it's been a lot of it doesn't seem like hands-on. It seems like Kelly McCrimmon's driving the ship, but it is Bill Foley who put all this money into this team and wants to win so badly. It's not. I don't want to compare it to Jerry Jones, Dan Snyder, because it's not apples to apples. But an owner who so badly wants to win that it sometimes spins out of control. And you have to imagine if this team somehow misses the playoffs after all these moves, after trying all this, after the Dadonov thing, if it is not a complete house cleaning. And this is not on George McPhee. He's so much doing on the business side and kind of running a lot of the marketing stuff that's been great for the Vegas Golden Knights. But I think everyone else kind of in that hockey department might be in trouble.
Stephen Whyno with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Whyno, I mean, one of the things that, listen, we lost so much over the last couple of years, from, due to COVID. Some things more trivial than others, but from a sports fan's perspective and a hockey fan's perspective, losing the best on best tournament at the Beijing Olympics was devastating for so many. Been a full 8 years since a legitimate best on best tournament has happened, but it looks like it is on track for 2024 to have a World Cup. It won't be Team North America before, it'll be the countries. But what are you hearing about that World Cup? What do we know about how it's going to work, when it will be played, how the schedule will be handled around it, and what should we be getting excited for come not next year, but the following?
Yeah, lots of moving parts on kind of exactly what the format is, but it sounds like the leading talk right now is a 6-team tournament with some sort of qualifying situation or doing a Team Europe. I think that possibility does exist again. The biggest question to me, and yes, it's going to be in that February kind of Olympic time frame that the NHL likes. I think they like even numbers on these. I would have loved to see something between U.S. Thanksgiving and Christmas, kind of just before you kind of really get into the stretch run and all those sort of things. Guys are in shape at that point. But it will be somewhere in that February range. Locations still to be determined. The biggest question for me now is, what do you do with Russia? And we don't know what the world situation is going to be like by 2024 or by the time decisions have to be made on this. You can't ignore the Russian talent in this league, Alex Ovechkin, Evgeny Malkin, Kucherov, Vasilevsky. The team will be incredible, but what will the team be? Will this be kind of an Olympic athletes from Russia sort of situation where this is a team playing with an NHL crest instead of a Russian flag sort of situation? That is a question that remains to be seen, and depending on, I guess, where the war in Ukraine stands at that point, where we're at on sanctions and that sort of thing. But to me, that's the biggest outstanding question that needs to be answered right now. You could play a 6-team tournament, you could play an 8-team tournament. I think that one of the other big questions the league is kind of wrestling with right now, and the PA as well, is how many non-NHL players do you really want in this? You could probably do a Sweden, U.S., Canada, and maybe Finland and maybe Russia of all NHL players. But if you have a Germany in there, if you have a Slovakia, Czech Republic in there, Switzerland, you're going to have 2 or 3 NHL players on these teams and a lot of guys from European leagues. And I don't know kind of what the NHL and the NHLPA are shooting for in terms of kind of how much talent outside the league they want.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, that's a great point. I would imagine that they would want and be pushing for as much NHL participation as possible. But again, if we're going to have a World Cup of hockey and we're trying to have it be the best on best, and if some of these countries' best players are not playing in the National Hockey League, in my opinion, they should be out there to maintain the integrity of this event that, has been such a long time in coming. Hey, speaking of Russia and the situation, over with what's happening in Ukraine, you, of course, cover the Washington Capitals most closely. They're the heaviest Russian team in the league. Alex Ovechkin at the top. And what's it been like around the Caps for the last month or so? And how has the world political situation affected the Capitals and the Russian players on the roster?
It's been surreal. And when you step back and there were moments very early on in the invasion where Alex Ovechkin scoring big goals while Russian troops, again, Alex Ovechkin's not the one who ordered any of this at all, but it just kind of the surreal backdrop of the U.S. Capitol and Alex Ovechkin scoring goals and getting cheered, and then there's Russian troops attacking and lighting Chernobyl on fire, and it's a very kind of a weird thing. Alex Ovechkin addressed it to his credit early on because of his previous support, longstanding support for Vladimir Putin. He did have to address the situation, but it's not like he's getting asked about it every day. It's not like this is kind of his call. It's weird because there's a compartmentalization, I think, going on for most of us around the Capitals and Russian players, and Alex Ovechkin in particular, that some people don't believe in and think he either shouldn't be playing, those sort of things. I think if you can set aside kind of the political part of it and say he's a hockey player who is very from Russia and is very proud of being from his home country, and you can set that aside, it's been incredible to watch him play. He's scoring 1 million goals. He and Nick Backstrom are playing together, and this may be one of the last years this team is really a contender, because it's going to get bad. The salary cap's going to happen. These guys are going to get older. It's been fun to watch. In Edmonton, he got booed a little bit. I was on that trip. He got booed a little bit in Calgary as well. But he passed Jaromir Jagr in the middle of all this, and his family, his wife and kids are stuck in Russia and can't get home. So it's such a very weird kind of human element time in that he's playing some of the best hockey of his career, and he misses his family, and he's sad that they're not there, and he can't say too much because they're stuck there. It's a very weird time to really kind of look at the mix between what's happening in hockey and what's happening in world politics.
We focus so much on Ovi for obvious reasons, but what about the other Russians on the squad?
I think it was tough on them early, and I think it weighed on them because they all have family back home, and not in Ukraine, but in Russia, and things are bad. The economy's tanked there. There's food shortages, those sort of things. You're worried about getting arrested for protesting. I think very early on when this started, it was really tough, and I think they've found, and Evgeny Kuznetsov in particular, I think has found a refuge in hockey, and Dmitry Orlov a little bit as well. Just refuge in going on the ice and not worrying about it. And even some of the Ukrainian folks I was talking to at a junior hockey team in Vegreville, Alberta, to them, it's the hour practice time or the 2-hour game is time that they don't have to worry about this. And then they go back to worrying about it. And so I think there's some element of that.
Stephen, let's quickly look at the games tonight. I was just doing a little bit of impromptu math. There's 10 40-win teams right now in the National Hockey League. And there are 4 games tonight in the league pitting 40-win teams going head-to-head. And all of them could be potentially very juicy playoff matchups. Let's start off with the Penguins and the Rangers. Penguins have quietly had one of the best seasons in the league so far. They add Rickard Rakell. They seem to be trending in the right direction right now. And going up against a Rangers team that certainly doesn't have the underlying numbers of some of the other 40-win teams, but they've got a goaltender playing as well as anybody on the planet. What do you make of those two teams heading into tonight and the postseason?
Yeah, and these two teams are almost locked into playing in the first round. Unless the Capitals go light on fire and one of these teams drops off, this is a first-round playoff preview. And it's very much a new school, old school playoff matchup to me. It's just you've got the Penguins who have been there, and they've retooled. And there's only 5 guys left from those 16, 17 playoff Stanley Cup winning teams, but it's still Crosby, it's still Malkin. Jeff Carter's been a great fit there. Rickard Rakell looks like a great fit there. They're polar opposites. This is a team that the Penguins are winning in spite of their goaltending, and goaltending is their biggest question. And then you've got the Rangers who are winning because of their goaltending. And Igor Shesterkin is in the conversation for the Hart Trophy as league MVP for that very reason, that he's carried them there. And I think for a game like tonight and for the 7-game series that they're about to play, it's a matter of can Igor Shesterkin steal a series, essentially, because I think the Penguins are a better team. The Rangers seem like they're ahead of schedule. The Penguins are amazingly, thanks to Ron Hextall in a big way, they've been able to keep their window open. And we always keep thinking, well, this is the year they'll fall apart. This is the year that they'll take a step back, and they don't. And it's incredible on Sidney Crosby and Chris Letang and those guys that they haven't, and that Ron Hextall's been able to retool that. I think the Penguins are the seasoned team. The Rangers, it would take, I think, Igor Shesterkin to kind of stand on his head to win a playoff series against the Pittsburgh Penguins.
6 o'clock our time tonight. It's the Leafs and Bruins, both with 41 wins, both with identical records. In fact, 41, 19, and 5. We talked before about pressure on Vegas to perform. The pressure in Toronto is unlike anywhere else in the National Hockey League because of the incredible drought since they actually won a round, what they're paying their top players, and of course, the epic choke job blowing the 3-1 lead to the Montreal Canadiens last year. And meanwhile, the Bruins have just quietly been getting better week after week after week. Where are you at on these two teams right now as they look ahead to the postseason?
When you said epic choke job, I had to think of which one, because there have been a few of those by the Leafs over the years. The Bruins, it doesn't feel like that sort of pressure is there, because as much as their guys are getting older and Bergeron's closer to the end than the beginning, this is a team that has quietly kind of turned over the roster a little bit. Jeremy Swayman's a young goaltender, so you're just kind of opening into his window here. David Pasternak's still young. You go and get Hampus Lindholm and extend him for 8 years. This is a team that they can kind of retool on the fly a little bit, similar to what the Penguins have done, and kind of keep taking shots at it. It feels like the Maple Leafs are another playoff series away from hitting the TNT button and blowing it all up, because how long can you, definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If Jack Campbell or Peter Mrazek or Eric Kallgren or whoever they have in goal can't stop a beach ball, and you can't outscore your problems, or those guys get cold, and you lose a playoff series, a first-round series, to either could be Boston, could be Carolina, could be Florida, could be Tampa Bay, get your popcorn ready for what's going to happen in Toronto, because the pressure is on the Maple Leafs to do something, and that playoff bracket is going to be absolutely brutal. Like, no one would blame them in a vacuum for losing to the Lightning or the Bruins or the Panthers in a 7-game series in the first round, but after seeing the same play over and over again, something's got to give. And you could tell me the Leafs lose in 5 games in the first round or win the Stanley Cup, and nothing would surprise me with that team.
Well, it would surprise me if they won the Stanley Cup, to be honest with you. But that's just maybe because what we're used to seeing from the Leafs in the springtime. And you'd have to think that Kyle Dubas knows the pressure on the organization's shoulders. And in fact, they may need to win a round or two for him to be back running the show next year. Hurricanes Lightning's a fascinating one. I mean, the Lightning, couple of games behind the Hurricanes in the couple of games of the Hurricanes in the standings. But I mean, honestly, Stephen, one of the most lethal teams in the league, and Carolina's been elite all season long. And the funny thing is, right now, the way things are, the Lightning could potentially be a wild card team if that's possible. And this could be a first round matchup, but pretty juicy one tonight on the slate.
Yeah, that's what I mean about the Atlantic Division bracket. It's going to be brutal to get through there. I just saw Carolina in Washington last night, and the takeaway for me is, hey, that's a really good team, and that's a deep team. Jesperi Kotkaniemi gets hurt with 1.8 seconds left on a questionable hit by Lars Eller that he got penalized for. Just a kind of an unnecessary play at that point in the game. Wasn't putting any weight on his left leg. Probably out long term. Not good for Carolina, but that team is so deep, and at least 7 defensemen deep. They're going to get Jordan Martinook back. And you're going to have guys out of the lineup who are legitimate NHL players. Adding Max Domi to that mix. Carolina, if Freddie Anderson stays healthy, is going to be a juggernaut. Antti Raanta starts tonight against Tampa because Rod Brind'Amour really wanted to make a statement and beat the Capitals last night in Washington, and Frederik Andersen had a nice game. The Lightning, they're just sitting there resting, and they're just lying in wait to make another playoff run, right? Like, this is a team that absolutely could win it again, but you're starting to see signs, just like a little bit with Igor Shesterkin, of kind of, he's played a lot of games and wear and tear. Nobody's played more hockey over the last 2 years than the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think at some point you get into a playoff series against the Boston, Carolina, maybe Florida, those kind of teams that eventually they're going to run out of gas. I love games like this tonight because you're going to see kind of what the sprouts of a playoff series would be like. We saw that with the Capitals and Hurricanes last night, and Brendan Smith and Tom Wilson throwing down with one of the best fights I think I've ever seen in person. A game like tonight, you got Rod Brind'Amour and John Cooper, who are kind of mad scientist coaches. Are they going to show a lot? Are they going to kind of hold something back? Are they going to test some things? Because knowing that you could see a team in the playoffs at this time of year, you're keenly aware of it as a coaching staff, and maybe not as players, but there's a certain amount of kind of X's and O's that they do or don't want to show. And that's what's fascinating about a game like this is it's almost a schedule loss probably for Carolina, given that they played in Washington last night, emotional game. They lose Kotkaniemi. They're playing their backup goalie. But they're going to probably empty the tank against Tampa, knowing that they could see them in a month and a half or so.
Well, and last one for you, Whyno, and we kind of mentioned the Avalanche and the Flames earlier in this segment, but they're going head-to-head tonight. We've seen a big move in the line today because it doesn't look like Nate McKinnon is going to play, which might take a little bit away from this marquee matchup, but still two teams with a ton of talent. This should be a great one, and wouldn't it all be surprised if they're playing 7 of these in a month or two?
Oh, that'll be a blast. And particularly the style of games of just the Flames and Daryl Sutter and kind of wanting to almost lock it down and have the ability to outscore teams, as we saw with that game against the Oilers the other night. And the Avalanche, who do want to outscore you and may have some kind of questions in goal, unless Darcy Kemper can kind of find his game. The same thing, the styles of hockey that we see from these teams tonight, it is a playoff preview, because it would take a crazy upset, I think, probably from any of those teams in the West for it not to be Colorado and Calgary. And I think, I don't know if you guys up there, I think people in the United States, particularly on the East Coast, who don't watch the Flames a whole lot, are sleeping on Calgary as a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. But I could absolutely see us at the Stanley Cup final in Calgary in June, because this team is legit.
Yeah, it's been an incredible turnaround considering how disappointing they were last year. And I mean, credit to Daryl Sutter. I have to think that he's the leader when it comes to the Jack Adams. Stephen, thanks so much for the time. Always great catching up. Let's do this again closer to the playoffs. You be well, my friend.
You as well. Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. Give him a follow on Twitter at @SWhyno. Check out his work covering the National Hockey League and much more for the AP. All right, Hammer time coming up in just 1 second. Do want to give a big thanks to Donnie and the gang over at Manitoba Battery. We've talked about the best prices on automotive batteries all winter long, but hallelujah, spring is rumored to actually be here or coming in a few days. And at that point, you're thinking about spring cleaning and spring fun. For some of you, you're going to need batteries. Are going to help you get the job done. Your lawnmower, the drill you're building that deck, the tractor that's helping you get the crop in for all our farming friends out there. Whatever the job is, Manitoba Battery has got you covered on the battery front. And then when we get closer to summer, it's time for the toys. Whether it's your summer hot rod, a golf cart that gets you around from site to site at the lake, a motorcycle on the open road, or a boat you'll be enjoying the summer days on, Manitoba Battery has the batteries that you need to enjoy our short summers. They'll deliver anywhere in the city with same-day delivery when you order by 1:30 in the afternoon at a much lower price than what you'd have to pay at one of the big box stores. Manitoba Battery, home of the best prices in Winnipeg, 1026 Logan, 783-8787, and online at manitobabattery.com. We had a lot of time to talk yesterday about Canada's men's national team, and we are counting down the days till that truckload of Canada soccer gear shows up at Royal Sports. The We Can shirts that the Canadians were wearing after officially clinching the spot in the World Cup will be there, as well as all sorts of merch from our Canadians men's national team, and hopefully some of the women too. I'm still waiting for my Des Scott jersey for the gold medalist from Winnipeg. Also, when you're there, check out an exclusive line of new era hats, old school Winnipeg Whips, 1996 OG purple Manitoba Moose hats, old school bomber hats, as well as those exclusive back-to-back Grey Cup champion hats. And I have heard a rumor that potentially throwback Gold Eyes hats to the first season from the mid-90s coming as well. Check all those out at Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway, and make sure you're following them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale news over at Royal Sports. And our friends at Knott Auto Corp are ready for the summer. Whether you're looking for a new vehicle, why not get into the car of your dreams over at Knott? And if you're thinking about maybe making the move to electric, talk to them about the Tesla Experience, a new program to let drivers drive, take home, experience a Tesla, what it's like to drive one, as well as charging it, everything that goes for it. Find out more from the experts at Knott, knott.ca online, and pop by to see them at Waverly and McGillivray. All right, one of my favorite moments of the week, our weekly visit with our good friend Jeff Hamilton, who joins us now on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hammer, what's up, man? How was your weekend?
Well, just another week in this crazy sports world city, and lots to talk about, and be more weeks here coming. Feel like we've been kind of waiting for this point for a bit. We're not quite there in this final stretch, but things have remained interesting. I think that's a positive takeaway.
Let me just quickly ask the CTO, are you getting feedback on that? A double line there, Reem? Yeah. Okay, sir. Just one quick audio.
I'm getting that feedback. That counts.
Yeah, you're all good now. I think sometimes we got to make a switch when we go to the phone. So we got it.
I feel bad for the viewers. I'm hearing myself talk and I go, wow, that's crap. So
no, don't worry. You sound great. Double Jeff Hamilton for us just for the first minute or so. Okay, well, let's talk about the Jets going into this trip out to Buffalo and Toronto. Before we do that, it was a very interesting weekend. Bottom line was this team absolutely needed to move off of the stench of the Thursday loss to Ottawa and pick up 4 points. They did it. I'm not going to say in the most convincing fashion, but no one cares about convincing fashion. They care about results right now as the team clings on to very, very slight playoff hopes. First, it was the return of Patrick Laine, an overtime win that night, and then Mark Scheifele stepping up when the team really needed him in what was overall a pretty dull game against the Arizona Coyotes, but we've seen Karl Vejmelka do this before. He keeps his team in games up against the Winnipeg Jets, but they were able to get another overtime goal, goals that eluded them earlier this season. Important results. What did you think of what happened on the ice?
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about after that Chicago victory in Chicago, it was, okay, now you need to win the next 5 in a row. Or you want, that's the goal here as you play mostly non-playoff teams and teams that are, like the Arizona Coyotes that are just basement dwellers. And, 3 out of 4, not horrible. I mean, it kind of puts a bit more pressure on you later in the schedule, but not a horrible mark. I mean, the Jets are 10-4-2 or something in their last bit. I don't know if that's exactly right. Maybe 10-4-1 in their last 15, whatever it is. They need to be playing like that and a little bit better. And so it's a bit of a daunting situation. The other part of it too, is we know, they need help because they don't get to play Dallas anymore. They don't get to play Vegas anymore. They can't make up those points in those, in that fashion, those 4-point games. As for the weekend, I mean, I feel like I've been saying this for a little bit. I mean, you can nitpick a lot of those games. I mean, you can nitpick the Columbus game and how it almost fell through the cracks. You can nitpick, the Arizona game that was a bit of a bore. You can nitpick periods, but the reality is, and you take this from interim head coach Dave Lowry. I mean, they're not going to critique wins. I mean, this team needs the 2 points. There is. I mean, I some of it gets lost in the almost like you're kind of left thinking like, is this good enough? Or at where's the bar, right? Because this team wants to be making the playoffs. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, Arizona played really well, or Columbus Blue Jackets are a good team, or Ottawa really came at us in waves. It's like, okay, like it's not that there aren't elements of truth in those statements, but it's like you want a little bit more convincing victories. But again, victories is what you need. The 2 points is what you need. As you mentioned, Vejmelka has just been this, whatever. I mean, he's had a good season, all things considered, but he's been particularly dangerous against the Jets. And just to get that victory, I mean, those are the ones where, and you can tell this team is savoring all their victories, right? I mean, no matter who it is, they're looking to inject a bit of fun here. So, I'm not going to go too much into critiquing them, but I mean, both those games you can definitely argue are a shot away, right? I mean, a shot away from being losses, having both those go into extra time. But Jets got both of them done over the weekend. That's what you need to do. It's a bit of a daunting schedule here. Kind of a mixed bag of teams, a lot of good teams. 7 of the next 15 or I don't know if it's 14 or 15 remain, whatever it is, but 7 of them are at home. Again, you get the Detroits, you get the Seattles, but you also have, there's a big, obviously, back-to-back coming up here, but it's the first of 3 back-to-backs remaining in the season, and there's a couple of ones that are going to be a bit more difficult down the stretch. But as far as results go, I mean, the Jets they're better than treading water. They're getting the results that they need. It might not be in the fashion in which fans are all convinced that they're going to do any damage in the playoffs, and some maybe have moved on and wanting a better pick, but the Jets are still hanging in there. And I think if they can make it competitive down the stretch here, at least it gives an opportunity to watch some interesting hockey rather than, falling out of the mix here, and which can happen very quickly where you have 5 or 6 games, the last 5 or 6 games be kind of a dud. So let's hope for some meaningful hockey here the rest of the way.
Well, exactly. And I mean, considering how ugly Thursday night was, I mean, if they didn't get back up off the mat and, win these 2 games, I mean, listen, these games were all seemingly sort of felt like must-win games. And, they sort of have to make one up that they gave away to the Ottawa Senators. And listen, I mean, certainly I'll say this about Buffalo, just because I've been betting them so much for the last month. I mean, this team is playing with they're like a brand new team right now. I mean, I think that win over Jack Eichel a few weeks ago got them believing that they are now on the other side. That is all in the rearview mirror. Last night, they were down 4-0, Jeff, and came back and won 6-5 against the Blackhawks, who frankly aren't very good either. And then you go into Toronto on the second end of back-to-backs. And listen, Toronto's got a big game tonight against the Boston Bruins. They are destined for the playoffs. They're going to be there. But I do wonder what sort of aftermath we might see in that game against the Leafs because of the circus that happened here in Winnipeg on the 5th of December. Of course, that was the game after the Bombers won the Western Final. The Logan Stanley, win game.
The touchdown.
Neil Pionk's issue. Jason Spetz's flying WWE knee on Pionk. I mean, a lot of things that I think many people have forgot about around the games. I will be interested to see how much the guys in blue and white have forgot about that going up against the Winnipeg Jets on Thursday night.
Well, yeah, we'll move back a little bit to Buffalo. Like, Buffalo has been not good, obviously, that when you take the whole season into consideration, but they've also not been bad the last bit here. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule now, and I mean, they squeak one out against Chicago 6-5, as you mentioned, down all those goals, but they also lose in overtime to the New York Rangers. They lose in a shootout to the Washington Capitals. They lose, they win in a shootout against Pittsburgh. They beat Vancouver, who is a desperate team trying to fight for a playoff spot in overtime. They win 1-0 in overtime to Calgary. And of course, before that, they got absolutely stomped by Edmonton 6-1. But, this is a team that's, I think, no one likes to hear that. Well, I'm not saying no one likes to hear this, but there is a relaxation and an easiness to the game where you don't, like the Jets right now are very, very tight, right? I mean, that's why they're trying to enjoy all these victories whenever they come, no matter who it is, because it's a very stressful practice for them right now. It's a very stressful day in and day out. There's not, they know that there's not a lot of room, margin for error here. So, it's a stressed out hockey, and you exert that mental energy. Well, there's kind of that mental stuff, for the teams that are out of the playoff picture, there's more of a relaxation. You get to play spoiler, you get to play, a little bit at ease. You try to be a little bit more run and gun. And at the same time, these players also are playing for contracts, right? I mean, they're playing to, if you don't make the playoffs, and if you don't make the playoffs by a ton of points, management is looking out there and seeing, well, who's continuing to give her, who fits into the future plans here. We're planning to blow this up, and a lot of guys, like the city they play in, regardless of where they are in the standings. Anyways, it's just a long roundabout way of saying that Buffalo is going to be no free spot on the bingo card. And then, whether there is some, leftover emotion or feeling when it comes to, when it comes to that last game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's an element of Toronto that, remembers how that went, and now you're welcoming them into your barn, and you're also playing high intense hockey as well. You're jockeying for position in the standings, and you're trying to play your best hockey heading into the playoffs and go on a run here in the last month. So, that's certainly going to be a big game. It's going to be a particularly tough game for the Winnipeg Jets from all of that I just mentioned, and the fact that it's on the second of a back-to-back game after what will be I imagine a challenging game against the Sabres. It will be a tight one. So and it's an interesting thing too, that if you don't really want to, you obviously don't want to go into, you mentioned if you lose against a team like Buffalo, you got to make up a game with a win over a team like Toronto. You certainly want to start that trip off strong. And so I think what the Jets need to be careful with is focusing and kind of practicing what they preach, in the sense of going game by game and not thinking too much about that Toronto game and the emotion to it. I mean, you saw after that game that they won against the Leafs, if anyone caught that video in the dressing room when they give out the pilot's helmet, like, the Jets were emotionally involved in that game. Mark Scheifele even made a note saying, that's the team you want to beat, right? It's not even like the Maple Leafs are juggernauts. They're just a team that, everyone grew up watching, and whatever, Original Six, all those things that come into play. But again, you need to keep that focus against the Sabres first, get those 2 points, and then get into what will be a pretty, whether it's an emotional game or not, it'll certainly be a challenging one against a good Maple Leafs club.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, listen, we're in the in the media, we talk about all these things around the games. I mean, we're going to ask these questions. And part of me thinks that, and a couple of people have said, it was a long time ago. These teams are in very different situations. I mean, none of that is really important to the plight of either of those teams in reality when they go in and drop the puck on Thursday night. That being said, hockey's a weird game, and guys hold grudges and remember things that seem very trivial to some, that it does end up showing it. What's interesting about this is, depending on what happens on Wednesday night, Ville Heinola might be in Logan Stanley's place. And I mean, I would imagine that Logan Stanley might be, along with Neil Pionk, public enemy number one to guys in that Maple Leaf room if they're actually in the lineup that night. And listen, since that game for Pionk in particular, I mean, he was injured. He had the concussion from the knee from Jason Spezza. Mm-hmm. And to me, really struggled. Like, you can go back to that game and what happened that led to, a really tough couple of months for Neil Pionk. So I'm not sure he wants to go in there and play the heel or the villain and be that involved going on. So, it will be a fascinating thing. But the bottom line for the Winnipeg Jets, we can talk about all these other side stories. The only story that matters for this team is, trying to get 4 points in these two games and get a little bit closer to Dallas, because, I mean, for all the, what's happening with Vancouver and Vegas, I mean, to me, the only team you really have to worry about right now is the Dallas Stars because of all those games. And frankly, being big fans of teams like the Anaheim Ducks, who they're going to see a lot of and get a chance to crack at tonight, who won one in their last 10 games.
Well, yeah, a lot there. I mean, just to go off, kind of existing schedules, if you look at it, the Jets really are in a disadvantage to a certain point in the difficulty of their schedule. And as you mentioned, I was kind of looking at the Stars final month of play, and you're right, a couple games against Anaheim, a couple games against other teams that are in that race. And that's the other part that, where you have guys like, Nate Schmidt talking today that they need help. The reality is because you don't play, not only do the Jets not play teams that they're chasing right now, or for the most part, they don't play Dallas again, they don't play Vegas again. Well, those teams in and around, that last wild card spot, either in or outside the playoff line, do play each other a few times. So it will result in some of them getting points. So they almost kind of know in some way, that they're going to have, the results are, they're going to need some help, but they're not going to get a ton of help because of that situation. And, you mentioned Ville Heinola, I didn't even really think about the potential of Logan Stanley being out against Toronto, but you're right. Maybe that is a tactic, Dave Lowry might take and not want to get the emotions up, because you're right. I mean, I don't think that the Toronto Maple Leafs go to bed every night thinking about what happened with the Jets game, the last time they played, but you'll damn well will remember the day of, or, warm-ups as they see it. I mean, they'll recall what went down there. And so maybe that does, extinguish some of the fire there, but I don't even think that's the play. I think the play is playing Ville Heinola because of what you saw last game. And I think what you saw from Ville Heinola last game, and I'll remind you, I mean, he won his peers gave him the pilot's helmet in the post-game celebration as the team's MVP. I mean, that wasn't just for what we saw on the ice, which is clearly, was clearly, I don't want to say vintage Ville Heinola, but certainly a structured Ville Heinola and, an effective one. But it was the fact he hadn't played in 6 weeks. He hadn't played, and he'd been up, down with the Moose and playing well there and logging a lot of ice time. And that's essentially the message he was given. I remember, after that Philly game that he coughed up that puck, we were in, I forget what it was, we were in Dallas or somewhere, and, he was being sent down, and we were talking about his situation, and, he needs to go play more hockey, Dave Lowry would say. He needs to, make better decision making. I even asked him today about, you look at and I know there's difference in mistakes. There really is. You look at what happened against, the Philly game, jumps over his stick. He made a decision, a read that, making the wrong read and having, like a Logan Stanley did a few games ago. I forget which team it was, but, whiffing on a pass up the sideboards and that that was Columbus, leading into, the back of his net. Those are both mistakes, but it's the reads. And so I think you saw, you didn't see anything overly flashy from Ville Heinola, and maybe that's what Dave Lowry wants from him, is just solid reads and that trust, because I know a lot of people, myself included, you want to see more Ville Heinola in the lineup. You want to see more, more puck movement. We know this is a quick team. We know how important transition hockey is to this club in generating offense and overall success. And Ville Heinola is a guy that can certainly help you out in that category. But I was happy to see him at practice today, working alongside Nate Schmidt. and then asking Dave Lowry afterwards, and yeah, he'll be in the lineup for Buffalo. I think it's a game-by-game situation for Ville Heinola in that, if he plays well against Buffalo, I don't see why you would take him out for Toronto. But yeah, we'll wait and see. It's an interesting one too. I asked Dave Lowry today about what he wants out of that sixth defenseman besides responsible hockey. I mean, he wants responsible hockey from every single one of his defenders. No, it's not a unique situation, but more often than not, if you're finding your way in and out of the lineup as that sixth defenseman, you need to chip in other areas. We've seen Logan Stanley be a contributor on the penalty kill. Well, Ville Heinola is not a contributor on the penalty kill at this stage of his career, but he is a contributor on the power play. And so I think he's a guy that, can certainly lend some help to possibly that second unit. And so we'll see what happens with him. But I mean, it wasn't long ago that, the reality was for Ville Heinola was that he wasn't going to get called up unless the Jets were out of a playoff position and other guys from the Moose were coming up to see what, so Winnipeg could see what they have in the future. Well, here he is in the midst of this playoff run. He's, it's valuable experience from every game is valuable experience for him. So I look forward to seeing what he can do and, contribute. And talking to him today, I mean, he has the confidence. He is frustrated. I mean, he didn't want to go into some of those conversations that he and Dave Lowry have had as he's moved back and forth between, the Jets and the AHL, but he is committed. And, I think he's feeling comfortable with this run. And, I hope the best for him because this guy is going to be the future of the blue line. And, I'd rather see it presently right now than necessarily in the future.
Well, and let me hit you with something that Remo and I were talking about earlier, and I asked Mike about yesterday. I mean, how significant of change do you think will come on the Jet blue line amongst the veterans in this offseason? I mean, we sort of said, let's set the number at 1.5 defensemen being moved, opening up spots for younger players. I mean, do you think it could be more than that? Could we be seeing two guys move, or will they probably just find a spot to, figure out what single guy makes sense to move that they can handle and, presumably have Ville and Logan Stanley in the lineup or some combination of the other guys pushing for spots in a Dylan Sandberg, a Declan Chisholm, Johnny Kovacevic from the Moose?
It's a fascinating question, and there's layers to it because one thing is, well, what exactly is the strategy of this team defensively, and what vision do you have for the future with this group? Because if I still think there's an element there where GMs and coaches are thinking, okay, we haven't got out of the woods with COVID. COVID's thrown this wrench in with lineup changes, with consistency, with a lot of these things, particularly in Canada, where the freedoms, or what we were able to do, like the restrictions are much tighter. And I'm not saying that the Jets are leaning on this thing that like, okay, this is like, I just don't think they've gotten a real great full picture. And now, fans will argue, and I'm not saying there isn't an argument against it, but that full non-COVID picture since they picked up this, created this blue line. So like, how much of that plays into things. And so, there's that. The other thing too is, where you want to allocate your money and whether or not you feel like, here's the other thing is, Charlie, how are you going to be with this organization? Like, I mean, if you're making decisions on defense, I think you need to be, before you make personnel decisions, I think you need to solidify who your coaches are going to be. Because if you don't know, I don't think, unless you're going to commit to Dave Lowry and I don't know what exactly Charlie Huddy's contract status is right now, but unless they're in the the driver's seat for these things,
what are you talking about? He got the Gretzky deal.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a bunch of contracts signed in a drawer, just picking them out every year. But and I'm not trying to beat up on him, but the reality is there's not a lot of coaches that hang around a team for as long as Charlie Huddy has. It's just and go through multiple coaches. So I think that the first decision really. Whether or not you're gonna, whether or not you believe it's over or under 1.5, the number you put out, 1.5 defensemen on the move, I think really depends on who's driving the bus here. So if it's Dave Lowry, I mean, he's gonna, or if they stay status quo, I think you might have a, more likely that things are gonna change because I think there has been evidence that suggests that this group, they're just not working. So whether it's one of, and I don't even know who that might be. I think you can argue Josh Morrissey's safe. I think you can argue the younger guys are safe because you just would have to replace younger, cheaper guys with younger, cheaper guys. So you kind of have that group of D-men, whether it's Brendan Dillon, Nate Schmidt, Dylan DeMello, like those guys are making decent money. There's obviously, Neil Pionk to a certain degree. So, I don't know that, but again, I think it really falls into, the vision of the coaching staff. If you bring in a new coaching staff, they might, hockey's small. They might even have connections with some of those players. They might look at the skill set of each one of the defense and try to implement a different system that might be successful with this group of 6. But there's lots of, it's a guesser's game right now. I don't think you can look at it and say this is going to be obvious, but something's got to give with this group. I mean, you have the forwards. Certainly you can ask for more scoring from the forwards, but at least the talent there. I think the overall defensive game, whether it's an overhaul in strategy and structure, or if it's it's an overhaul in personnel, or both, I think is really going to be determined by who's running the bench next season.
Well, you know what? I mean, I really do think, though, that Kevin Cheveldayoff has to first and foremost make the decision, because what happens with that blue line and moving a significant contract off the blue line, presumably would bring something back. And I think you're really looking at shifting, as much of your cap expenditure is presently spent on the blue line to maybe support the forward group a little bit, and then make room for a young guy on an ELC to come in and hopefully play significant minutes, help the team win some games, and do it at a much lesser price. And obviously you get the benefit of the forward. But the coaching staff is fascinating. And I mean, what's different about this year, Jeff, to me, when you look at the big picture of the organization and True North and where they're at this season, and let's just assume for a minute that the team plays well and stays in the fight for the next few weeks, but falls short. I mean, we're looking at a 10 or 12% chance of making the playoffs. That, tells you all you need to know. If the numbers bear out and the team misses, but say they stay in it till the final week of the season, I still am not sure that the organization could come back and say, hey, we saw enough in the second half under Dave Lowry to think that he is the guy. Even if they think that, I think that they've got a unique position that they've never been in before, where they really do need to sell the fan base on, the upcoming season, that they are doing the right things, that they're moving in the right direction, as opposed to just staying in the status quo. And unfortunately, that's not a good thing for Dave Lowry, to be honest with you, because, for all the things that he's been dealing with, and maybe he has done a great job behind the scenes, we don't know. The on-ice product tells us that not much has changed. And if not much has changed, that's disappointing, considering how much money this team is spending as a cap team and the expectations we had coming into this year.
Well, and I think that, it's a great point, Huss. I think it really does fall on Kevin Cheveldayoff and what he views as, the obstacles in which the Jets have had to face this year, particularly from a coaching standpoint. And if you look at Paul Maurice, he walked away from the team, couldn't offer any more to help this organization. And the Jets didn't exactly get a coaching bump with Dave Lowry. And I think, to your point, it's going to be a tough sell to say this is a new guy or a different regime for the apathy that's starting to set in amongst the fan base, that they want change. They want to know what the future is. But I've always come back to this big thing, is that you can't really sell your car until you buy a new one. And what are the options for the Jets? That was the conundrum at the trade deadline, where it was like, we're not buyer, or we're both buyers and we're both sellers. Like, you need to do some asset management. And clearly we saw that with Andrew Kopp going out the door. But you also saw the buying part, and so committing to getting Mason Appleton back, getting just adding to the group for guys that for a run here, because the reality is the Jets certainly didn't do those moves to finish ninth. That would be the worst case scenario, and that's probably where they're headed. Or at least that's what they're fighting for, that final spot. So the reality is I think it creates, I think you wanted to keep in the push so that you could get a couple playoff games, not just for revenue and the gate money, which is super important, of course, after what's been a tough couple seasons for all NHL teams, but also to inject a little bit of hope here. You never know what can happen when you make the playoffs. Now, I don't think it's going to be anything like the Montreal Canadiens last playoffs, just given the structure and the way the divisions are working out this year. But it's certainly got to do something for the fans, and that really is the tough part. And I go back to, well, who's available? Who wants to come to Winnipeg? And it's not just, we talk a lot about like the Winnipeg weather, we talk about the market. There is only 32 head coaching jobs, right? So, there's somebody of quality out there, and whether it's a homegrown guy like a Pascal Vincent, or one of the free agents out there, or someone who gets fired by the offseason. That's ultimately what happened with Paul Maurice, right? He was on the TSN panel and then came, had that history and was looking for a job, and kind of resurrected his career in Winnipeg. So there might be another coach out there that goes, oh well, that's for me, or I don't have many options, right? Like when you have the guys that leave, good contending teams, and they usually have their pick of the litter. Well, the Jets kind of need to, I don't want to say luck into one of those, but get maybe the ideal situation. Now, that's one of the things. The other thing is we all know that Mark Chipman is an involved owner. Do head coaches want to be under that relationship? Do they want to be, a lot of the marquee head coaches kind of have their say, right? Get control. Well, I think there's a bit of more of a hands-on approach from the ownership of the Jets. And, that trickles into,
I don't think that has anything to do with the coaching, though, of the team.
I mean, it does. I think you don't think if you're a head coach, a coveted head coach, that you don't want a good idea of what the culture of the organization is and what you're saying.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, he might be, and I know they work in lockstep with management, with Kevin Cheveldayoff, but I don't think for a second any coach of the Winnipeg Jets, whether it be Paul Maurice or Dave Lowry, has been moved in a particular way on making some sort of decision from the owner's box. I just don't believe that. And I haven't seen any evidence to say that, as much as we know that he is involved, cares a lot, and is involved. I'm not
suggesting that Mark Chipman's going down and saying you need to play this guy on the third or second line. I'm just talking about the culture, right? Like, a lot of people don't like, an involved owner. Like, that is
a big separation from the coach's office to the top.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because a lot of the times, Huss, it's coach GM. So that's the relationship you have. Well, in Winnipeg, it's coach, GM, owner. We all know this. Like, it's like the Canadian Mafia in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. It's very similar in that respect at the Winnipeg Jets. Again, I'm not suggesting that there's a bad way and a good way. I mean, I'm certainly not suggesting that Mark Chipman is going down there and demanding things happen, but it's a group situation. I mean, those three guys have a lot of communication together. And maybe that works for some coaches. Some coaches it doesn't. And we all know that. We all know about ownership activity, and it goes across sports, So this isn't me dumping on Mark Chipman. This is me sharing the realities of the Winnipeg Jets in trying to get a better coach. A lot of people look at it and go, well, I wish Daryl Sutter was here. You know what I mean? He would get, what he's been able to do with Calgary if we could just get him. Well, Daryl Sutter wasn't a slam dunk to come to the Winnipeg Jets. You know what I mean? Or who knows if he would have been all that interested in doing it. And so that's what I'm saying, is that my point isn't to, again, create some kind of horrible situation in Winnipeg, as much as it is to create the situation in Winnipeg, and whether that would be appealing to a coach who may have other options. I mean, Paul Maurice didn't have other options when he came to Winnipeg. He wasn't fighting off offers. He ended up being a good coach in a lot of respects. How
many coaches really do, though? And I think your point earlier, which was an astute one, there's
Barry
32
Trotz
jobs.
Gets fired from New York Islanders. He has his pick of the litter. Like, he's a name that gets tossed out nonstop as a guy who might want to come back home. That's not the case necessarily. I'm not saying he wouldn't. I'm not speaking for Barry Trotz, but if he gets fired, or Bruce Boudreau in some ways, like some of those guys have, options. Or if they're, and here's the other thing, even if they get fired at a time when there's less teams, available, jobs open, these guys who get fired create openings, because other teams have no problem firing their coaches and just picking a guy up 48 hours later. The Jets would never do that. That's what I'm saying. Like, these, and so it's not an excuse. It's not, a teardown. It's the reality of, okay, if Dave Lowry is not your guy, who are potential candidates? And, and I think Kevin Cheveldayoff needs to think long and hard about who he's going to, fill in that chair, because we know GMs only have X amount of head coaches they can go through before it's the GM situation.
Well, one other thing that is interesting, and, however things shake down, with Dave Lowry's situation at the end of the season into the offseason, if the team does move to add a new head coach and potentially a new staff, it will be such a departure from what they've done in the past. And listen, this team and this organization has had its toughest financial year ever. The crowds haven't been what they have been able to be counted on before. They've spent more money on players than they ever have before in a season, right at the cap. And I do wonder if they have that same appetite to pay elite level market value for a top coach, as opposed to giving someone that they think has a very bright future their first opportunity to get that gig in the National Hockey League. And that's why a guy like Pascal Vincent's name is always mentioned. Certainly he's got that connection. They know him as well as anyone for the work that he's done before in the organization. And presumably as a guy that has never had a shot before, he's not going to come in and be, be demanding Barry Trotz money, if you will, as opposed to a guy like that being available. Bottom line is, I mean, the situation around the coaching aspect of the club about as fascinating as we'll have had for the last 10 years plus here in Winnipeg. Speaking of Pascal Vincent, by the way, he's going to get his first chance to be that head coach today, as the head coach of the Blue Jackets is on COVID, and he's going to be behind the bench as the big boss tonight. Hammer.
Yeah, good for him. I didn't even know that, actually, but that's and I think it's interesting too. And Pascal Vincent might be the next guy. I mean, he might be an option because there is something a bit lacking from his resume, and that's NHL head coaching games, right? I mean, a lot of veteran players want veteran coaches or experienced coaches. And I'm not saying Pascal Vincent isn't experienced. Of course he's experienced. He was with the organization before he went and took over the head coaching job at the Moose. But what he is tremendous at is communicating. He's a great communicator. He worked with a lot of the younger guys in the Winnipeg Jets organization, so he certainly has a connection to those guys. Even like Kyle Connor was with the Moose for a little bit, Josh Morris, all these guys have kind of been through his rankings, and he's a very good communicator and a well-respected guy. He might just be an option, down the line here. And you'd certainly be a guy who would want to come to Winnipeg. He loved it here. And I think he kind of, I think there was a little bit of reluctance for him to leave. If you would have, if you had a couple beers with him, I'm sure he'd say, I just never saw Paul Maurice leaving. You know what I mean? Like if he probably saw Paul Maurice never losing a job. And the reality is Paul Maurice wasn't about to lose his job. So that, he had a long leash, but yeah, so that I mean, it's certainly a fascinating situation for him, in the future, but as you mentioned, in the present too, because I think there's, I think it's a cool opportunity for him, and, it's going to continue to, these kind of opportunities are just going to continue to light the fire under him, and as he pursues obviously to get an NHL coaching gig, and I think one of the things too for him to go to Columbus, one of the deciding factors was to get more people talking about him. Right, the Jets are going to talk lots about him. The Jets are going to say he's great and terrific, and mention all those things I just mentioned in the positives and more. I think what his hope is to go to another team and have more people talk about who he is and what he does. So just kind of build that credibility and build his reputation. So, I mean, we'll see, but, best of luck to him. And, we'll see what happens as he gets a pretty cool shot tonight.
Hey, just real quick before we get ready for the Moose game tonight in the Moose homestand with Dan Fink. It's been deathly quiet around the Canadian Football League for the past month. Anything of interest coming across your ticker? Or are we just sort of waiting for things to get going closer to the training camp?
Where have you been? It's just been a fist fight over 4 downs or 3 downs. It's
wow, that's not it.
Just the latest argument in the league. No, you know what? It's kind of the calm before the storm situation right here. I mean, we all, we had an opportunity to maybe look at potential rule changes over the last week. The GMs just had their meetings in Toronto, which were postponed from I think about 6 weeks ago. They're supposed to be in Kananaskis in Alberta. And they were done in kind of connection with the CFL National Combine, which was in Toronto over the weekend. The meetings were a couple days before. Some interesting things, rule change wise, is they're strongly considering. Look, they want to improve scoring and they want to improve game flow. And so they're strongly considering things like moving the hash marks closer to the middles, like aligned with the goalpost, just a little bit wider than the goalpost, so that there's more, like the hash marks with the way they are, you call the boundary side and the field side. Well, a lot of the boundary side is being exploited. But, a lot of people complain about how far it is to throw on the field side. So by bringing those in, it's supposed to help out the offense and give them quarterback more space to throw. They're talking about moving the field from 110 yards to 100. I don't think that's going to be happening necessarily next season. They're talking about moving the kickoffs to the 25-yard line instead of the 35-yard line, which is obvious. Would give the offense, give the returning team a little bit more room to make better field position. Lots of things are happening. Game flow is a big one. They're talking about, maybe trying to figure out something with the 20-second play clock and altering those kind of things. Or they're talking about the ratio. That's on the table. I mean, the ratio is an interesting one because that's going to need to be, discussed with the players in the CBA. These other rules can be done through the rules committee with the league. The ratio idea I keep mentioning and not really explaining is that they want to have maybe an even split on offense and defense. Obviously, those who know, it's 7 starting Canadians. Right now, a majority of those Canadian starters are on the offensive side of the ball, particularly on the offensive line. This isn't a shot against Canadians, but Americans are, for the most part, better than Canadians. So they thinking that if you put more Canadian starters on defense, it'll create more mismatches on offense, which lead to more offense. So there's lots of stuff going on. But the other thing is the negotiations. I mean, the current CBA expires in May 14th. I can't believe it. I mean, as the snow melts here, we got football, CFL football coming in about 6 weeks when training camp starts. So there's not a ton of time to discuss a new CBA, but the reality is, or history at least suggests, is that the longer they have to negotiate, the more likely things go off the rails. Someone picks up their ball, walks away, and then they don't talk until it gets close to the deadline. So to me, there's no real panic for a new CBA. I think it's going to be a heated one. I think there are going to be challenges on both sides. One, the league trying to sell to the players that we're all in this together and that, we need to build a better future. And they're probably going to argue that they need a bit more time to get more financially secure. Whereas the players are going to come out and say, well, that's great, but we're the ones that have been sacrificing, a lot over the last 2 seasons, both in our contracts and, prorated contracts for the season, which was only a 14-game season, and then there's just teams being told to pay closer to the cap floor, right, than the ceiling. So I mean, there's lots going on here. People both sides feel like they lost a lot in the last 2 years, and both sides are going to do their damnedest to try to make up as much as they can over these next 6
great
weeks.
That always sets up fun CBA negotiations. I completely forgot about that.
Up.
Hammer,
Buckle
great
up.
stuff, man. Appreciate you joining us as always. We'll look forward to more of your work in the Freep over the course of this next week, and talk to you next week on WST. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, my man. Thanks for having me on, and shout out to the chatters. They're the ones that make this show.
Lots of hammer emotes in the chat today, Jeff. There's Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Follow him on Twitter at Jeff K. Hamilton. We are getting ready for a big Moose game tonight as spring break is underway. Should be a nice crowd. Just before we bring Dan Fink in, a big cheers to our friends over at Little Brown Jug who are ready for spring and summer. If you haven't already, what a great time to pop down to the brewery and tap room on William Avenue to check it out, enjoy some of Little Brown Jug's finest, and meet with some friends. And while you're there, you can pick up all the great tastes of Little Brown Jug, all 7 of their beers, as well as maybe get into one of their variety packs and great merchandise as well. Otherwise, grab the great taste of 1919 at fine bars and restaurants throughout the city, or pop by your local beer store. And if you aren't making it out, but you do want to get the great taste of Little Brown Jug, they're delivering on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Simple and easy to order online and get it delivered to you over at littlebrownjug.ca. Wow, we've had some pretty wild Princess Auto curling reports lately. Great to see Carrie Anderson and her team staying together after their bronze medal performance at the World Championships. We'll have a little more curling to talk about as we get closer to the World Championships coming up starting this weekend in Las Vegas. Of course, Princess Auto, proud sponsor of curling in Manitoba and around the country, not to mention Team Mike McEwen and Team Jennifer Jones, and the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Visit them at one of 2 local locations or shop online 24/7, 365 and get those ideas rolling at princessauto.com. And with the Moose game tonight, Jets back at home on Saturday. Great spot before and after the game is always Boston Pizza City Place. Whether you're having a few beers in the lounge or eating in the dining room with the family, it's just right next door to Canada Life Center. And if you're not going to the game, no better place to gather with your gang than your local Boston Pizza, watching the game on the big screen with big sound and enjoying those gourmet pizzas, famous Boston wings, and ice cold schooners as well. And as always, you can get those game day deals and more by ordering online at bostonpizza.com. Well, yes, the Moose are back, and so is the Fink on WST. the pound for pound best backdrops of all of our guests. Dan is always in a great spot. And tonight he's where the Manitoba Moose are back in action at home, coming back off the road. Dan, what's up? Welcome back to Winnipeg. How was the road? Oh, hold on a sec. Remo, I got Dan muted. Is that on our end or his? There we go.
You got me now.
There we do. Okay. What's going on? Welcome back to the Peg. How was the long roadie?
The pitfalls there of working off the phone when I can't actually see the screen on the other side. Road trip was great. It was 2 weeks. It was a bit of a grind. Obviously started off real well for the Manitoba Moose. They had points in each of the first 4 games there, set themselves up for some house money down the end of that swing, and got into Illinois and ran into a little bit of troubles, mainly with the Rockford Ice Hogs. So they come out of the trip 3-2-1. So mission accomplished. Obviously would have liked to pick up a couple of more points along the way, but they got the job done on the road, and now looking forward to a little Canadian content here on this 4-game homestand.
Yeah, no doubt. Dad, by the way, just move the mic a little closer to your mouth if you're okay. We're just having a little tougher time hearing you.
We're having all sorts of issues here.
You're used to, the headset. Yeah, definitely a little bit better. Overall, I mean, you look at the standings right now for the Manitoba Moose, and, it's been amazing. This team has been anything but an offensive juggernaut this year. They've rotated through defensemen and through goaltenders all season long. And then you look up and there they are, 4th in the Western Conference, still hanging in there in a really good spot. What's the mood around the team right now, knowing that they certainly are sort of destined to be a playoff team? They've gotten past the nerves of the NHL trade deadline, pretty much know the guys they're going at it. And now, of course, into this homestand as they try to solidify their position in that Western Conference and division.
Yeah, the wild stat just a little bit ago was that the Moose were in 5th in the entire league, and they didn't have a player in the top 125 in scoring. Absolutely ludicrous. They were, until the last couple of games, the only team in the league that didn't have a player with 30 points. Now they have 2, and we'll probably have a bunch more on the horizon. But it's a team that's very excited. I think this stands for pretty much any team in the playoff race in the AHL this year, because it's been 2 years, and for some of these guys, even a little bit longer, that they haven't really had an opportunity. They haven't had that trophy at the end to fight for. They haven't had a playoff spot to battle for. And so now that's an opportunity. They have that objective that they need to reach beyond just playing for contracts, beyond just playing for their teammates, which are great reasons in of themselves. But when you're playing for a Stanley Cup, Calder Cup, Memorial Cup, whatever league you're in, that's what you're there to do. And so now they have an opportunity to go after a Calder Cup. And when you look at what this team is, they're so deep, and getting deeper seemingly every week as they get healthier and healthier, and there really aren't a whole ton of weaknesses in the lineup. So they're well built for the playoffs. They're a physical team. They're a hard team to play against, and you never know where the offense is coming from on any given night.
Dan, fill us in on the playoff format right now. I mean, sometimes we're looking at divisional records. Sometimes we're looking at conference. We've got some teams below other teams that have clinched playoff spots. How are things going to work once we get to the final of the regular season?
Okay, so this year we're working off points percentage, because there's 3 different amounts of games that everyone's going to be playing. The Moose this year playing 72. Some teams in their division are going to be playing 76. Pacific teams playing 68. So points percentage, big part of this one. Hence why you'll see the points not seemingly lining up with the standings. So in the Central Division, at least, the top 5 teams will make the playoffs. The 4th and 5th team will play a 3-game series, and then the winner of that series will move on to the more standard format with the 5-game first round, and then on we go into the 7-game round. So currently, the Moose sitting in 2nd in the Central Division, which, if everything ended today, they'd play against the Milwaukee Admirals in that 2-3 slot, and pretty much just business as normal, whereas the Chicago Wolves would wait a few extra days for that 4-5 series to complete. In the Pacific Division, a couple more teams make the playoffs, because they have, I believe it's 9 teams in that division now. It continues to grow. But yeah, so for that Central Division, that's really all you need to worry about for the time being. And the Moose certainly well situated there, and looking forward to, although the Rockford Ice Hogs are slowly but surely gaining ground on the Milwaukee Admirals, so maybe not as clear-cut as it once was, maybe about a week or two ago.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned Rockford, because, and again, this is sort of the weird part of teams that have what games they played. I mean, Milwaukee's played 7 more games than Rockford. and is up on them by 9 points in the standings. But then you look at the points percentage, and it's not a big difference. It's 556 for Milwaukee and 545 with Rockford. So, you win 2 or 3 games in a row from the team that's catching up, and you potentially move up without actually going forward. Listen, before we talk about tonight, you just mentioned, how this team continues to win games without any, clear-cut offensive stars. How much credit should Mark Morrison get for the job that he's done in his first year behind the bench as Moose head coach?
A ton of credit. I mean, the coaching staff has done a fantastic job. I mean, when you consider this team has 22 players that have recorded 10 or more points on this season. Now, they did get one addition in there in Morgan Barron to that group, so 21 throughout the whole season. That's impressive when you consider you're dressing 18 skaters a night. So they're working in guys to the lineup. They're developing players who have a ton of career best seasons out there. They have got this team buying in, and you know what? As guys start to get healthy, maybe there was some. I don't want to say disgruntled. That's probably too harsh a word to use. But some guys all of a sudden see their ice time dropping, and well, that's the competition, guys. You've got to fight for your ice time. So they sat everybody down, had a chat, said, "Hey, these are the roles that you might have to fill, and it's all about this team." And there's nothing above the team when it comes to this group, and they've kind of settled right back into that now. So this is a group of guys that thinks every night that they can go out and win, whether it's the Chicago Wolves, who are the top team in the division. That was an excellent game back on Wednesday and a lot of fun to call, or it's the Rockford IceHogs, who seem to be the masters of the rope-a-dope of late, giving up a ton of shots and just scoring on a breakaway when they get it. So every night they've got a chance to win because they lock into that team identity. They know who they are as a team, and they play so well together. So things need to change up. Guys have played in different roles because of all the COVID issues, because of all the injuries. So there's nobody that's unfamiliar with a role that they might be put in throughout the way. And of course, you've got guys like currently out with an injury, but Greg Morellis was at one point the first line center for this team. When he comes back, he'll probably be in more of a depth role, which creates some great matchups for the Moose.
Now, you mentioned Morgan Barron, the new guy that came over in the Andrew Kopp trade. Most Winnipeggers that have been on the road have not seen him yet. Tell us about the newest member of the Manitoba Moose, how he's looked, and where he's fitting into Mark's lineup.
Yeah, so it's exciting. Obviously, tonight will be Morgan Barron's first game here in Winnipeg. So that's yet another reason to come out to the rink to see the Moose in action today. But yeah, it's kind of funny. I was talking to Eric Dubois earlier today, and he says, well, he's just another Moose player. He's exactly fits into the mold. He's a big center, 6'4", 220 pounds. And talking to Jeff Malott, who's kind of the Moose perennial fitness competition winner at the beginning of the season, says, this is the guy that's going to knock me off that seat because he's an absolute horse. And man, he shook his hand when I first met him and felt every bone in my hand crushing. He's a strong man and good in the dot, and he's going to go to the net. He's going to go to the net hard. And so still settling in maybe a little bit to the lineup, but you know what? You can start to see where he's going to be real effective in front of that net and really fit well into this Moose identity.
Dan Fink is the play-by-play voice of the Manitoba Moose, getting us ready for a busy week at home with 4 games coming up before Sunday for the Moose. But tonight is the spring break staycation game, a great giveaway. Tee up what fans will see tonight if they make their way down to Canada Life Centre.
Sorry, 1 sec, costume change here. There we go.
Bucket hat night.
Get my fashion going here. This is springy, right?
You look great.
It really matches. It really brings out the suit. It's bucket hat night with the spring break staycation game, going with the tropical vibe here tonight. There'll be some performers on the concourse, things like that, and of course, first 3,000 fans in the building get this beautiful, beautiful bucket hat that I will be wearing all summer long. I might have to get an extra one because I'm probably going to wear through it. This has been one that's been kind of on the list for the last couple of years, so we're glad that we're finally able to get to it. It's pretty cool. It's got the branding on the inside and everything, and it'll fit pretty much every noggin. It's a pretty big hat, so looking forward to handing these out. And who knows, maybe this will be one of those glorious nights where you give out a whole ton of hats and somebody bags a hat trick, and then they all end up on the ice because you gave out 3,000 hats. But looking forward to a great week. Follow your dreams as well on Sunday. That's a 2:00 game on April 3rd, where if you haven't seen the jerseys yet, highly recommend checking out the social media feeds to see those new Follow Your Dreams jerseys. They are, once again, immaculate, and it's going to be a big crowd on that Sunday. I think it's going to be over around 7,000, I think is what I've heard. So it's going to be rocking. Yeah, it's going to be a great week here at Canada Life Centre with these 4 Moose games. Obviously, the Canadian competition, Laval in the house tonight, and Toronto later on in the week. So really looking forward to these games. Going to be some good crowds. So there's plenty of options with these 4 games to make it down to the rink, and plenty of reasons to make it down here tonight.
Well, that is great. So first 3,000 fans get the bucket hat at tonight's game. It's the spring break staycation game, and then the Moose at home tonight, tomorrow, Friday night, and then Sunday afternoon with the Jets-Kings game stuck in the middle there on Saturday night. Great time to be in Winnipeg and off school. So if the kids are going crazy, you know, there's a lot of great hockey waiting for them downtown. Dan, thanks for doing this. Have a great call tonight.
Thanks for having me on, Huss.
Appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk soon. There it is, Dan Fink. Follow him on Twitter at Daniel the Fink. And can you hear his broadcast tonight online at 680cjob.com. All right. Hey, big thanks to our friends over at Nick and Nikki DQ for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. You know it well. 4 locations in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba. Of course, the Niverville location, very popular in that growing town. A lot of excitement in Niverville about the arrival of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League coming up with an expansion team in Niverville. If you're out there, make sure to pop by the Nick and Nikki DQ. They've got 3 in the city, the DQ Northgate with the drive-through, DQ Polo Park, and of course the DQ St. Anne's, and all 3 locations in Winnipeg now available to order on delivery at Skip the Ditches, DoorDash, and over at Uber Eats. Make sure you try the new Stack Burgers. They are absolutely phenomenal. And our friends at Canadian Club are ready for the summer. We are just days away from the official launch of the ready-to-drink Canadian Club and Ginger Ale. You can pick that up at your local Manitoba liquor marts. And next month, beginning in April, which I guess is Friday, you'll be able to pop in to your local Manitoba liquor marts, grab Canadian Club, and with it, you'll get a free can of the CC and Ginger to try. Make sure you do that the next time you're down at your local Manitoba liquor marts, and make sure you join us on Friday afternoon for another big marble race where we'll be giving away another Winnipeg Sports Talk hoodie in the collab we did with our friends over at Canadian Club. All right, we will get to the Coolbet Lines in a minute. Amazing games tonight in the National Hockey League. But let's bring in Michael Remis because there's a couple things we wanted to get to before we finish it up with the lines and get out of here. And that is an interesting rule change in the National Football League, Remis. And it seemed like all the complaining after the epic Chiefs-Bills game finally knocked some sense into the National Football League. And yes, the Colts and Eagles putting forward a suggestion to guarantee both teams getting to touch the ball with possession in overtime. That has been passed. So what happened to the Bills last week and what happened to the Chiefs against the Patriots a couple years ago will not be replicated in the postseason, but regular season overtime is going to stay the same.
Yeah, we'll see what happens here. The one thing, so I like that they're changing it because I think both teams should get to touch the ball. It's so much the coin toss. I think the league is skewing to favoring the offense, so it's a lot easier for a team to march down the field, especially in that Bills-Chiefs game. Just who was it? The Bills were just so tired from having to defend the Chiefs on those last couple drives, and then to go do it again. I thought they were already at a disadvantage, and then losing the coin toss there. We'll see how it works. I mean, I wonder if more teams are going to defer now, so you know what the team does first, and then maybe you can go for 2. But I mean, people are just going to get mad now when one team scores a touchdown, another team scores a touchdown, and then what? So the first team gets to go again, and they kick a field goal, and then the game is done, and everyone's going to be like, well, the other team should get to go answer. So we'll see if people are going to get outraged, but I think it's a step in the right direction. Sometimes I wonder in the playoffs, like, why not just go play a full extra quarter? Why does it have to be sudden death? I guess you want that sudden death style walk-off finish with everyone celebrating. I guess, in soccer,
well,
they
and
play.
I think with teams, and I think, in soccer, they used to have the golden goal, and now they actually, if you go to extra time, they play the full extra time. I think the thing is that football is such an incredibly taxing sport. And, if you're winning an overtime game, it puts you at a disadvantage in the following game. So the sooner the games are over, the better. But at the same time, you want to maintain the integrity and give the teams somewhat of an equal chance to win. And I know the people that, have always said just play defense. It's been a tough day for them today because they finally done this. But I keep on going back to the question, why now and why not after the 2019 AFC Championship game? I'm not sure why. That being said, I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's better for the competitive integrity of the game.
I would agree. I think you want to see both offenses get a shot. I wonder if they would make 2-point conversions mandatory or something. I don't know how they move forward with this. I like the change because we would have liked to see Josh Allen respond. But now there's going to be all these, okay, who's got the advantage? Is it the team that goes first? I guess because you might get a third opportunity if the second team matches, although the second team could go for 2, and then it's over. So I do like this. I mean, regular season, it's still, if you get a touchdown on the first possession, you do win. And I guess they want to keep games short. And we've seen so many overtime games, they'll go long too. So I like the change, move in the right direction. Why it took so long, Hustler? Great question. I guess because Tom Brady didn't benefit from it, right? Is that what it is?
That's a theory that some people hold. Any news on Brady trying to get his trade to Miami going on? I know Mike, new head coach of the Miami Dolphins, said that was fake news today. So he's moving on. But Andy Dalton does have a new home. He's now a member of the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. Is he the starting quarterback? Is it Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston, or what kind of role is Andy Dalton going to play? I mean, he's pretty hit and miss, mostly miss these days, but I would think he's a capable backup. He's had success before. I mean, didn't put the Bengals over the top like Joe Burrow has, but I mean, he was fine for a bit, but now he's getting kind of older.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? He's kind of an adequate backup, and we'll see what happens with Winston. I mean, I think it makes sense, for Winston to be the starter there going forward. But you do want to have, an adequate backup in case you need it, especially when you're not putting $35 or $40 million into your starting QB position. You may very well need it, and that's an interesting situation for the National Football League. Niners have said that they're not cutting Jimmy Garoppolo, but that Trey Lance will, quote, start sooner as opposed to later. And Julius Peppers is kicking around. Actually, not just Julius Peppers. I was about to say Julius.
You probably saw Jay Peppers or something in the highline and the headline.
Wait a second. He's not a safety. No. It's Jabril Peppers, who is moving over from the New York Giants to the Peppers on a 1-year deal worth up to $5 million. He joins a group along with Devin McCourty, Adrian Phillips, and third-year guy Kyle Duggar. I'm fascinated to see what the Patriots look like, especially with Josh McDaniels gone now, Mac Jones with 1 year of experience under his belt, and it really being Bill Belichick's show going into this season with the sophomore quarterback.
Yeah, and I don't know if I guess the AFC East is maybe the more interesting it's been in a couple of years here, with the Dolphins trading for Tyreek Hill, and they got Jalen Waddle. Tua's going to have to take a step. The Jets, they're not interesting, but we know the Bills, defending, they went pretty close to the Chiefs in the playoffs, and the Patriots, I think they're ready for a bit of a bounce back here in Mac Jones' second season.
No doubt about it. All right, let's get to these Coolbet lines tonight, because there is some amazing games. I mentioned that with this earlier today when talking to Stephen Whyno. 10 40-win teams in the National Hockey League. 8 of them are going head-to-head tonight in the league. We started off with the Leafs and the Bruins. This last night was minus 120 for Boston. Obviously, a lot of steam coming in on the home team tonight, because the Bruins are now minus 139 favorites, and the Leafs are plus 118 underdogs. The other game out east, well, there's 2 actually other game out east that features 40-win teams. The Rangers at Penguins. Penguins are minus 161 faves at home. Rangers plus 136. And a number that hasn't really moved at all today, Tampa Bay minus 143 at home against the Hurricanes, who are plus 122. Canes, as Stephen Whyno just mentioned, beat up on the Caps last night 6-1, but did have to travel, playing the second end of back-to-back games. The other 40 versus 40 game tonight is the Colorado Avalanche against the Calgary Flames. The Flames minus 133, Colorado an underdog plus 113. That was plus 102 when I did lock shop picks last night. Unfortunately, it's changed because no Nate McKinnon tonight. Big loss for the Colorado Avalanche.
Just on that Nathan McKinnon, so he was in a fight on the weekend with Matt Dumba, and he's got a hand injury, and Jared Bednar did not sound very positive about it, so he might be out for a while. That's something to watch for with Nathan McKinnon. Now, the Colorado's like so deep. They've had, everyone's seemingly been out at some point. Makar, Manchin, Landeskog, McKinnon's even been out. So hopefully, it's not long term, but I mean, that's the worst when you're star player in a fight. What a terrible way to go out.
Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. So there you have it. 4 incredible games in the league tonight. Other games on tap. Islanders minus 154 favorites against the Blue Jackets, who are back home at plus 131 as home dogs. Carolina's minus 400 favorites, and the puck line is minus 2.5, taking on the Montreal Canadiens. I know Dusty earlier today on the Lock Shop. By the way, check out today's Lock Shop. Lots of fun. Hit the golf this weekend and more. He has a minus 189 ticket on the Panthers to score over 3.5 goals, which to me was a bizarre number. But I guess when you see how well the Panthers are playing and how often they score, it does make some sense. Elsewhere, Wild, a massive minus 323 home favorite against the Philadelphia Flyers. The Ottawa Senators, playing with heavy hearts after the passing of their owner, Eugene Melnyk, last night, are in Nashville to take on the Predators. Ottawa plus 180 on the road, Preds minus 217. And the final game of the night, go Ducks, go. All Jet fans will be pulling for Anaheim to beat the Dallas Stars and eat up one of those games in hand. Dallas, a minus 169 favorite. And the Anaheim Ducks, a plus 143 favorite. Jets, of course, off to Buffalo this afternoon. Tomorrow, they will take on Buffalo, an early game at 6 o'clock. We will have Murata Tesh join us. And big announcement, big guest announcement, Reem. We've waited for this for a while. I did the CJOB pregame show with him on the weekend, and I'm so excited to tell folks that Trevor Kidd will join us tomorrow on the show. We'll get his thoughts on what he's seen from the Jets lately and their predicament going into Buffalo tomorrow night and Toronto on Thursday.
Yeah, I've been bugging Trevor to come on. He wouldn't respond to my text messages, and you got him. So that'll be.
He said he's got some beef with you.
Does he?
Yeah.
We always got along.
Pleased with you at all. No, of course.
He ghosted me so many times, though.
He loves you. He said at times it was working. He's doing a bunch of different things right now, but he is contributing on CGOB for some games. So he's been at recent games. He was there on Sunday, and he'll be on Winnipeg Sports Talk tomorrow. So make sure you join us for that.
I'm just kidding around. A couple other notes here. Before we wrap, about the GMs meetings. Salary cap going up $1 million next year.
I'm surprised at that. I thought this would be flat again this year, considering all the games that were missed.
And Frank was saying it doesn't sound like it's going to go up for a while because the players have to pay the pandemic debt back to the owners. So we will see about that. I don't know if you saw this Kyle Dubas clip where they asked him about officiating, and he kind of just laughed. And I was like, everything's great with the officiating. We're doing fine. There's no problems at all. And I think people just want to see some accountability when they make errors.
Here's the thing about refereeing. And everyone is always on the ref's case. But the NHL's lost a number of veteran officials, and they moved some out, bozos like Tim Peel. And there has been a real challenge at every level to get good quality officials. I mean, these kids are treated like garbage by some of the idiot parents that are at these minor hockey games. And I mean, it drives them out of the sport. And I mean, that is absolutely, it is a problem that trickles all the way down to the grassroots level, because people don't grow up thinking, oh, I want to make the National Hockey League as a ref, but you can't play the games without the referees. So I always like working with Hockey Manitoba on the Respect in Sport program and the Thank the Stripes weekend, because I think it's incredibly important. And yes, I'm guilty of it too. There's a garbage call against your team and you're pissed off about it and you talk about it and you rant about it. But in reality, these games doesn't happen without the referees. So while you would like it to be better, yes, But I think there's real significant challenges at every level of the sport when it comes to officiating. And a big part of that is driving out younger referees early on that don't need to take the crap that they take from a lot of people going out to these games. So I love the programs that they've developed to try to get, junior players that are finishing their career. We've seen a number of U Sports players as well go into the program afterwards, because first and foremost, you got to be able to skate at a really high level to handle officiating in the National Hockey League. And that is going to be something, but it's not going to be fixed overnight, Reem. But I do think that they have, some important initiatives happening to fill the funnel of qualified referees. Because I'll tell you what, you want to get to the National Hockey League, the best opportunity one could possibly have is be a good skater and get into officiating, because God, we know that there's a demand there right now.
Yes, very well said, Hustler. A lot of people agreeing with the chat. I think reffing is hard, but I do think that some mistakes have been made. I will say, as I was a teenager and I umpired slow pitch softball, and I would go home crying in tears. It's, first of all, softball, you think you know the rules, but there's a lot, intricacies that you forget about that come into play. Also, you're making a call every ball and strike. I mean, if you want to be a hockey ref, just put away your whistle and let them go at it.
Good point.
You have to make every ball and strike in softball. You got parents yelling at you, so it was horrible. The one thing to wrap up, we didn't get to this yesterday. I wanted to touch on this over the weekend. It was actually Friday night after the Jets game. The Foo Fighters putting out the tweet announcing the death of Taylor Hawkins. I was floored by that. Him and Dave Grohl were bros. He's been in the band since '97. And for Dave Grohl, he was in Nirvana, the drummer, when Kurt Cobain died. Now he's the singer in Foo Fighters, and his drummer died, 50 years old, had a family. Those guys incredibly tight. They followed up today with a tweet that they're going to cancel all their upcoming tour dates. That did include one here in September.
Oh, so that's done. No Foo Fighters in September.
So I don't know what's going to happen with the band going forward. Maybe Dave plays under another name, but I don't know if they're going to. I don't know if they're going to continue as Foo Fighters going forward. Very stunning loss, and I mean, for my money, pound for pound, maybe the best rock band in the last 20 years. And frankly, I will put the Foo Fighters catalog up against many of the greats. And I know sometimes, you need to give more time for them to be recognized with the best ever. Mm-hmm. But Dave Grohl's career on his own, one of the best in the history of rock music. And listen, I'm a big fan of the Foo Fighters. I know you are too. So, that was devastating news for so many fans of the band. Gone way too early at just 50 years old. I think that's what made it that much more stunning of the nature that it happened. Yeah, I spent some of the weekend. When I saw them here in 2007, and I saw them at Lollapalooza, one of the best shows I've ever seen in the rain. And Taylor Hawkins, he could drum and he could sing, and watch every video. He just seems so happy all the time, playing with legends like Rush. And at the Live in Hyde Park I watched on the weekend, he's playing, singing. While Jimmy Page is playing rock and roll, then he's playing the drums, and Dave Grohl singing. They just seem to have such a good, so happy all the time and have such a good time. And 50. I was, these celebrity deaths, the last couple months, where we had Bob Saget, Scott Hall, Taylor Hawkins. It's been rough for celebrity deaths the last bit. Again, very sad.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, you just mentioned where you'd seen them. I was at that show here in Winnipeg, and one of the coolest musical experiences I've ever had. We were at the Super Bowl in New York, and I had a couple buddies that had won the Super Bowl trip, and were staying in the Bud Light Hotel, and Bud Light put on a couple of, exclusive events. And Libel was with me because Gary was in Sochi. And the guy running this event for Bud Light happened to be a buddy of Libel's from Winnipeg that was living in Toronto. So got Matt a ticket through it. This was an impossible ticket to get. You couldn't buy it on a secondary market. And my buddies that had won the trip got a pass from somebody else that was doing something else that night. and we got to go in, and I'll always remember we went into the show. It was like this massive tent, and up right above us, I said Bill Cowher was there, and then I look over, and Kate Upton was canoodling with one Justin Verlander, and at that point, I'm like, God damn, that Verlander has the life, man. 30 mil a year, winning the World Series, and he's got the most beautiful woman in the world grinding him. And then obviously they ended up getting married, but they out came, and we didn't know it was just the Bud Light concert, and the Zac Brown band played, and I was familiar with them a little bit. People really loved that. They finished up. They said, don't worry, we've got another act coming out. And then about 15 minutes later, out comes Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters, and this was just after he had that, what did he break his leg or something, Reem? And he was off touring for 9 months or whatever. He came out and played that show, and something that I'll never forget. So glad to have the opportunity to see them then, and hopefully at some point they'll be back out to play those songs because they mean so much to so many people. But it won't be the same without Taylor Hawkins, who was, founding member and as much a part of the Foo Fighters as Dave Grohl himself.
Yeah, I think he wrote in his book that they just had this relationship. They were like brothers from another mother, and couldn't imagine doing it without him. So I don't know what's gonna happen going forward, but there seems like it's gonna take some time and figure it out. So again, that one. I texted my friends, and was like, no, like, and it was so shocking because the Foo Fighters broke the story themselves. Usually when there's a celebrity death, you hear on like News Story or TMZ. It was just this, and you hear maybe something happened and you're waiting for confirmation. This was straight up from the band putting it out. And again, very, very sad.
Yeah, well, everyone I know has been playing a lot of Foo Fighters for the last few days, remembering Taylor Hawkins going forward. Hey, by the way, Coolbet Lines tonight. If you want to get on it and you haven't already played a Coolbet, use the promo code WST on your first deposit. We'll double it up to $200. That's going to do it for us. Trevor Kidd on the show tomorrow. Murata Tesh as well. We will get ready for Jets Buffalo. Of course, 2 huge games for the clubs. They head on the road against Buffalo and Toronto before coming back to Winnipeg for the LA Kings on Sunday night. Thanks again to all of our sponsors, including Coolbet Canada, Canadian Club, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza, Princess Auto, Little Brown Jug, Not Auto Corp, Royal Sports, Manitoba Battery, Culligan Water, Vita Health Fresh Market, and our friends downtown at F Apparel. Big thanks to everyone that joined us today on YouTube. Thanks to you podcast listeners as well. And a big thanks to Michael Remis for making it happen, getting us on and off the air. Folks, thanks for being with us. Have a great night tonight. Enjoy the ice game. Enjoy the Moose. And we'll see you tomorrow right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.